Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for December 30th, 2013. I'm Dennis Cohane, the chairman, along with my colleagues Tom Hurley and Katie Conlon. This is Emery Fagan, our town administrator, and Paula Rizzi, our executive secretary. The first item on the agenda is the approval of meeting minutes from December 10th, 2013.
Move to approve the minutes of December 10th.
Motion made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. The next item is the confirmation of the future meeting dates, where we're meeting on the 11th, which is Saturday in Tom's office,
Yes.
to discuss the goals and objectives for our town administrator.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking forward to that. It's probably 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, should be. Yeah, just have a whiteboard up there.
Whiteboard, we're going to each write down our goals for Emery. We're going to cross out which ones actually cross and come up with a bunch of stuff for you to do next year.
That's right.
Okay. So that's on the 11th, and then we're meeting on the 21st, regular meeting again.
Correct.
But also the
7th also, yeah.
January 7th.
January 7th and 21st are regular meetings, and then the 11th is in Tom's office. Okay. Next is Citizen Speak. Anyone here for Citizen Speak? Cheryl, come on up, Cheryl. Cheryl Flightman. Hello.
Good evening. I'm Cheryl Flightman, co-chair of MCAAI, which everybody already knows is Milton Citizens Against Aviation Impact. And I just wanted to give a brief summary of the major points from the meeting that we had with Congressmen Capuano and Lynch regarding the airplanes. First of all, I think it was an excellent meeting. I think it went better than we could have hoped. And I think that Congressman Lynch and Capuano are very engaged and will work with us on this. Each of them recognize that we have a major problem with airplanes overflying Milton. There are too many airplanes flying over Milton, and we need fewer planes. They also recognize that planes are flying below the standard required altitude. They should not be flying as low as 1,200 feet. And the planes should not be allowed to depart so early in the morning. Some do start as early as 4:30. In fact, Congressman Lynch thought they weren't supposed to start until 6 in the morning, and Congressman Capuano was looking into that. And some planes are flying as late as 1 in the morning or even later. And I think everybody's noticing now that Sunday nights and Monday mornings are the worst. It's like when the business flights start to pick up again, and it's brutal. And one Milton resident did describe it, that the planes fly nonstop on end and it becomes torturous. And we do have some citizens who are suffering from serious health problems and environmental insomnia, lack of concentration, increased asthma, and property values are now being affected. People see the planes flying over certain houses and will not buy. More planes can be rerouted to fly over the water as not to disturb the taxpayers in Milton. And we really have a big fight on our hands against FAA and Massport. And I really think it's time for the selectmen to step up to the plate and take a stand so that they're on the same side as the congressmen, because the congressmen are working for us to help us. And I think it's time that the selectmen write a really strong letter to Massport. And at least that way it's on record. And the FAA needs to be held accountable. Both of the senators agreed with this. And they both agreed that the FAA is a very difficult agency to work with and that they are very, very arrogant. And Senator Lynch said he would look into the start time of these planes, and he wants to get a meeting together to look at the redistribution of flight loads. 50% of all flights are over Milton, and he said that was way too much and that we need to send a strong message to the FAA. And then last week it was in the paper that they just announced a new airline flying in. I believe it was Turkey, and I saw that they're talking about having El Al. So the more of these nonstop flights that they get into Boston, the more of them are going to be overflying Milton. So I think that that will ultimately be 5 new airlines internationally flying nonstop in 2014 and then more in 2015. And Senator Capuano recognized the serious health issues and asked us to prioritize our issues and to meet with him. He said he's always available to meet with us anytime on any of these issues. And Congressman Lynch wants to set up a meeting on what he called the Milton Corridor, which is Milton, South Boston, Dorchester, and he wants to have a room full of people, and he wants to get Massport in the room with us. And we're working on that, in addition to getting the speakers that I mentioned from the BU School of Health that had that study. So the MCAAI will continue to work on these issues in the coming year, hoping to get a better quality of life for the citizens of the town, and we're looking forward to the strong support of our Board of Selectmen in the surrounding communities. And of course, we will be reporting back to you at regular Board of Selectmen meetings to let you know what has come up. But again, as I said, I think it was an excellent meeting, and given the fact that it was a very, very cold night and we had standing room only in the room, I think that sent a big message. So,
Thank you, Charlotte. And,
thank you.
anyone else for citizen speak? Hello.
Hi, my name is Patty Elliott, and I live at 97 Brybrook Street. And I'm here tonight to talk about the sign at what used to be Kennedy Carpet at 502 Granite Ave. I saw that it was on the agenda for tonight, and I just wanted to speak against the LED sign. I looked into some of the history of the variances that had to go through. I know it's bigger than the allotted sign that should be there, and I know it's very keeping with the neighborhood and the other signs in East Milton to even have an LED sign. So I just want you to know that there are many people in the community who have seen the wonderful work of the sign committee that really changed East Milton Square and made it such an attractive place for people to go. And now we have this billboard, I think, that was supposed to attract maybe people from the highway. I certainly don't think anyone from town finds it appealing, but I just want to make you aware. I saw that first it was for Kennedy Carpet, then it got some approval to be for the sale of the building, and now it's looking for some new approval. And I really hope that we can try to keep the signs and keeping it's an attractive building. I don't dispute that, but maybe a wooden sign with crane lighting would be much more appropriate for the building. And I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you,
that.
Patty.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else for citizen speak? Hello.
Hi. I'm Phil Johanning, 23 Parkwood Drive. I want to talk about two things tonight. The first, I want to say that Cheryl did a great job, but I also want to reiterate that I do think the selectmen should provide more leadership on the airplane issue. I think Senator Joyce has done a fantastic job in providing leadership. At the meeting, he spoke out and said that when Bland's, the Boston Logan area noise study, is completed or in the process of completing it, the FAA should be forced to sign on. And as a result of that, I feel that became an issue at the CAC. And they found that the FAA would not sign on. And I think that Senator Joyce's idea was a good one. You know, there's no point in working as hard as the CAC would need to work to finish plans and then give the FAA an escape clause. So he's provided excellent leadership, and I really appreciate that. But I would like to see the selectmen provide that same level of leadership. I'd like to see someone from the selectmen really pick up the banner and start running with it. And I haven't felt that at all. I didn't feel it at the meeting. I didn't understand why none of the selectmen spoke at all about their goals for airplanes over Milton. I didn't notice anyone talking about their concern for health problems. I didn't see anyone talking about their concern for property values and the impact it would ultimately have on our tax base in Milton. So I share Cheryl's thoughts. I really think that we would like to see at least one person on the Board of Selectmen pick up the banner and really support our committee. We had written a letter to Massport after we read the 800-page document, the ESPR for 2011. We prepared a letter. We asked the selectmen to sign it, and you didn't sign it. It took us a lot of effort to read through the 800-page document. It took us a long time to formulate the letter. And then, after all that work, nothing happened. We went to the trouble to appeal the 33L RNAV, and we asked the Board of Selectmen to fund the appeal, the $450. That wasn't done, and we raised it ourselves. $450, nothing. But it's nothing for you, too. You know, to show some support would be very much appreciated, in my opinion. And as Cheryl said, it was a standing room only meeting on a very cold night, and there were a broad range of issues that were brought up by the citizens, and primarily health. And Mr. Capuano talked about his asthma problems, and Mr. Lynch talked about the number of breathing issues that exist in his district. So it's obviously a very big issue for all of us. And I'm sure that all of you have kids. We don't know what the long-term impact is. And now that all the planes are flying in a narrow corridor over all of us, I think we need to really fight this much more intensively. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly tonight was the sewer amnesty program. I really have been a little shocked at this, at the town's willingness to give a slap on the hand to people who have essentially stolen from other ratepayers. And I think that's wrong. You know, the concern I saw about bankrupting people, you know, the people live for the most part in a $500,000 house. You know, we're not going to bankrupt them. And I think that Mr. Lynch's story about how people used to dig up the street on Sunday and attach to the sewer line, it alarmed me. I wondered, how did Mr. Lynch know that? Like, if no one in the town knew about it, how did he know about it? How did he know that the street used to be dug up? And in going to previous meetings, I see that, you know, every time NSTAR puts a little dent in the pavement, the town seems to know about it. But people were digging up the street and connecting to a sewer line, and no one knew about it? I mean, it seems outrageous. I think that, you know, my research tells me that this is a felony for the most part. I think there is a tried and true methodology for collecting money from ratepayers. If I didn't pay my water bill, there would be a lien put on my house, there would be 14% interest charged until I ultimately paid. And I think that's the methodology that should be used in collecting sewer fees. If you can go back 6 years, you should go back 6 years. These people have taken advantage of people who actually honestly paid their bill. So what you're doing is you're rewarding a group of people who did something dishonest at the expense of people who behaved in an honest fashion. So I think it's wrong to reward dishonest acts. Furthermore, I think there should be some concern about the problem going forward. And I think the solution to that is that anybody who lives on a street where sewer is available should be forced to connect to the sewer at their own expense right now, because that would prevent subsequent problems with, let's say, illegal connections. So, finally, I was a little concerned about this Canton Water Agreement, and I'm wondering what would be done with the money. Like with the sewer amnesty program, the idea was that a fund would be created to stabilize sewer rates. So I'm wondering, with this Canton Water Agreement, will this money be available for the ratepayers, or will it be available for the town? My vote, for what that's worth, is that it would be available to stabilize water rates. I think that's the fair thing to do. And that's it.
Thank you, Philip.
Mr. Chair, could I just, for the record, In terms of, because I've heard this more than once now, and why the selectmen did not speak, we had the two senators there, the two congressmen there, for what we said was an hour and only an hour. I believed that it was in everybody's best interest to give the maximum amount of time, the 1 hour, to the two congressmen. And I didn't want to cut into that time.
And neither did I. Yep.
And
We
that
agree.
is solely the reason
Correct.
that I chose not to speak.
Right. Anyone else for citizen speak? Okay, that's it. We'll move on to item number 5 on the agenda. And it is the approval of the FY15 budgets. I'd like to invite up Amy Dexter, Town Accountant, to discuss the group insurance budget.
Yes.
Hello, Amy.
Good evening.
Emery, can you just give a brief description of what the group insurance is?
The group insurance, sure. The group insurance budget is the health insurance plans for the town, Milton employees and retirees.
Okay, that's good.
The 80% that's paid for by the town, the other 20% is withheld and paid by the employees. So this budget represents the 80% of the premiums in total that are paid for the health insurance.
Okay, good.
And we do have a pleasant surprise.
We do. The level dollar, level service budgets presented for FY15 are coming in at $10,223,873. That's approximately $301,500 below the fiscal year 14 appropriation. If I could, I'd just like to explain
Sure.
to everyone what happened with it. In fiscal 13, the actual expenditure for the group insurance came in at approximately $425,000 less than what had been appropriated for the year. The tricky thing with this budget is we prepare it in November based upon census data that's available at that time, that being the number of employees that are enrolled in the health plan of the town. When we do the budget, that's the best information we have available. We also put in an estimate of what we think the premiums will increase for that fiscal year. And if you think about it, we're doing it in November for not the next fiscal year, but the fiscal year after that. So we're doing it like about 18 months or so in advance. So it gets a little tricky. We do include a factor in there to account for any increases in enrollment, just in case more people come on the plan. What we experienced in fiscal 13 was a decrease in the number of employees on the health insurance, or retirees and employees on the group plan. Therefore, the census data enrollment figures that we use were much higher than the actuals. When we turned back that money, when Anne-Marie and I were coming up and developing the budget for FY15, we said, let's take a look at 14, because if that was our experience in 13, let's see where we stand for 14. And we recalculated the budget within the last month or so for fiscal 14 based upon the current enrollment data that we have now. And we believe that the budget for FY14 more than likely is $300,000 more the appropriation than we will probably need. Now that $300,000 doesn't translate into a large number of employees, but if you look at the narrative I submitted, it mainly relates to the Blue Cross plan. The data we used for the family enrollees was 284, when the actual census information right now is 269. That's only 15 people coming off the plan. Reasons people could come off the plan is they could leave employment with the town, and perhaps their spouse picks up the plan, or any kind of change in family status. They can change what plan, go on to their spouse's plan or whatnot. So 15 people, less than what was budgeted at approximately $17,500 a year, comes out to be $263,000. So it doesn't take a large number of employees to change to affect the budget. So we felt the appropriate number, well, we talked with Cook and Company, Peter Savage, who is our representative there, and he did an in-depth analysis on the actual expenditures and compared that to what we felt, or what he felt the premiums would need to be in 15 to cover that. And based upon that analysis, it appeared that we could stay flat and not increase the premiums. The health insurance trust is healthy. We don't feel like an increase at this time, we feel it's probably where it needs to be based on the information we have. Therefore, the level service, dollar level service budget that we're submitting is more in line where we think it should be based upon current enrollment, as well as assuming a 0% increase in the premiums.
So I have one question, and it's from my own knowledge. I'm sure, Tom, you've dealt with it a long time. The only reason I guess the price goes down is because less people are on the insurance policy, and not because we got a reduced rate.
Right, right.
On the overall
We have not decreased any premiums. It's all in the number, mainly the number of people that have chosen to be on the plan.
Is there ever a time that there would be a reduction in the policy rate?
Well, when we changed the, a year and a half, 2 years ago, we changed the premium split. It used to be, 85-15, and we changed it to 80-20. That would be a collective bargaining thing.
So
But
that's the only way that the actual premium would go down.
Well, you got to understand, we have kind of a, well, it's not odd, but it's, but we're mostly self-insured on our, we have self-insured, we pay claims up to a stop-loss amount with our own money, not insurance money. Okay, so what we're paying in is partially to pay for stop-loss insurance and partially to fund a fund that will pay out claims. So some of it, quote unquote, we call it premiums, but it's a premium to the insured, but to a large degree, we're the insurance company. We're taking a large chunk of the risk, not an insurance company. Now, what is the maximum claim we pay?
100,000 stop loss insurance. Kicks
So-
in at 100,000.
So we pay the first $100,000 out of our own pocket.
So we're paying approximately $17,000 per employee in the town. And if there is a claim, we're paying up to the first $100,000.
Per employee, yes. Yes, so if they put in, once their medical claims in a given year exceeds $100,000, then the stop-loss insurance, which we pay a premium to an insurance company for, but a drastically reduced premium, kicks in and covers anything over that. So the insurance company is picking up the catastrophe insurance, if you will, and we're covering the initial dollar claims. To the employee, it's seamless because Blue Cross kind of handles all the claims and just hits our trust fund for, what we,
Bill us monthly.
right.
So how much is in this trust fund?
I didn't, that was one thing I should have brought the balance. I believe at the end of June, wasn't it?
So let me get this right, Amy. Let me get this
About 2
straight.
million, but that doesn't include the incurred but not reported costs. at the
Right.
end of the year.
If we have 100 employees that have 100 claims at $90,000 each, the town has to pay that?
Yes.
But that's factored into the premiums from historical data, according to Peter Savage.
Right, but it's we're paying it with our own dollars. In other words, we're putting appropriated money. We are the insurance company for the first $100,000 of claims. There is no insurance company out there. We're the insurance company. We're self-insured for the first $100,000. So we're putting money into a fund and using that money and the interest that money earns, just like any other insurance company would, and we're paying out those claims. So if people stay real healthy, we make money. If we make money, then we tend to reduce our,
We would reduce our premium at that point.
Right.
We have done very well since we've gone self-insured.
How much do you think is in this trust fund approximately?
It was approximately 3 million, give or take a couple, 100,000
Good.
at the end of June, but I'd have to go and run some reports to get the actual figure as of the end of November.
All right, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
Right.
on average, how much do we pay out of that trust fund every year?
figure if 10 million goes in and 3 million's left, and 3 million, give or take, is probably about the balance.
No, I meant on claims, sorry.
But
Up to the 100,000.
probably close to the
It's
10
on.
million goes in, goes back out, either in administrative costs and stop-loss insurance or claims.
8.9 in fiscal year 13 were paid for the health plans, 8.9 million.
But we pay that to Blue Cross, right?
Well, we paid to Blue Cross, but again, it's not insurance, they're just our
There are
administrative.
administrative
Correct.
plans.
But I'm talking about actual claims up to 100,000. How
Those-
much do we pay out on average per year?
8.9 million.
You're telling me there's $8.9 million worth of claims in this town every year?
Yeah. Between claims, administrative costs, because there is an administrative cost in there to having the insurance company,
Cooking company be our consultant.
right, and handle claims.
Well, would some of it be part of the premium?
The 8.9 million is
Yeah,
the
it's-
premium.
factored
Yeah,
into
some of
our
it's stop-loss
premium.
insurance, too.
But when Cook and Company does the analysis of where the premiums need to be, they factor in all of those costs
Sure.
into it. So the premium that we set, that we pay 80% and the employee pays 20% of, has factored in all of these additional stop-loss insurance and whatnot. That's part of the analysis.
I don't remember what do you remember what the stop-loss ballpark is per year? That premium? I want to say it was about 10% of the total, give or take, but
Yeah, I don't,
in other words, of the 10 million, it was about 10%, but that's a,
I'm not sure what it was. I'd have to look that up, Tom.
I think yeah, this is important to know, I think, going forward. I think what you said, Katie, that the 8.9 million includes the premium.
yes.
Right.
I think it includes everything.
It includes-
Costs, the self-pay, and the premium.
Okay.
We should confirm that.
Mhm.
Cook and Company's fee. Because when we met with Peter, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, we had invited him to come along, we asked him that same question, but are we considering all of these other things? And the answer was yes.
Yes.
That all of these other things are definitely factored into his analysis when we're determining whether or not the premiums are at the appropriate level.
Okay.
So the good news is rather than submitting a level dollar budget for maybe for group insurance, you're submitting your use budget by $300,000.
Right.
Right.
That's from the current year's.
Mainly due to the change in the enrollment, the number of people enrolled in the plans. No reduction in premium, nothing else, other than we believe the enrollment figures,
Census
we know that
figures.
enrollment figures today are much lower than what they were last year this time when I was doing the budget.
Yeah, and if you look at, if you look at the budget, of that 10 million, $750,000 of that is paying into Medicare. But we require everybody to be on, well, actually, now everybody has to be on Medicare anyways. So, unless you are an old employee, you're probably not in Medicare. Sorry, Paul.
Too old.
Ooh.
It's prior to 86, I think it is, or 84, something like that. But otherwise, anybody hired after that date has to be on Medicare, and there's a 1.45% of total compensation contribution by the town to Medicare. That's $750,000 of the $10 million. And there's a small amount for life insurance, and the rest is the payment into the health insurance.
Okay. So Amy, what's it costing for FY15?
What the total budget is for FY, $10,223,873, which is a reduction of $301,500 from the FY14 appropriation.
So Amy, in 2016, the forecast is for about a $500,000 increase.
5%.
That's just obviously right now a
And
ballpark
that- yeah,
estimate.
I mean, there's nothing more than that's based on current enrollment figures and us just saying what's a reasonable estimation. There's really no way to get it.
Is that the non-salary wages increase? Is that the 511,000
I'm
for the
sorry, I'm not
FY16
following you.
forecast?
Yes, it's all it's all group insurance. There's no salary and wage in this budget at all, so yes. I just took a 5% increase, 5% increase from the FY15 budget that I'm
No, it says
Submitting.
non-salary and wages increase, 500.
Right, non-salary, right. Mhm.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Good.
Anything else?
No, good
Good.
news.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thanks, Amy. And then we have two,
I'll make a motion to approve and forward to the warrant committee the FY15 group insurance budget, in the amount of $10,223,873.
Second.
motion was made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. And we have the Conservation Commission budget in the amount of $2,500.
That's level dollar.
Yeah. Consultant, I believe.
I have one question on this, and if you look at the gift accounts, it's after Schedule B.
2,000.
Well, there's a lot of money here. The Neponza River is 100,000, and the Conservation Fund is, a special project is 55,000. Where does all that money go?
We should have Amy here to answer that. but-
Here she is. You want to come up again, Amy, please?
Well, I can't tell you specifically without looking at it, but usually a gift, there's a letter that goes with it that restricts what it can be used for. So we would have to talk to Kathy Bowen or somebody from the Conservation Commission I mean, I could dig out paperwork, but I don't have the answer tonight.
So the wetland, like there's a lot of fines here. Where does that money go?
I believe, is that the new revolving fund that was set up a year or so ago, the wetlands one?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't have,
Yeah.
so that one, I have the documentation in my office, but there's so many different gift funds and grants that I wouldn't want to guess, but I know I believe that's the one that was set up a year or so ago.
So
They
the
haven't spent anything out of that because they haven't really collected much. Last I knew, I think maybe
About
very,
1,500.
yeah, very minimal amount, even though it's been in existence for a year and a half or two.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks again,
Okay.
Amy.
You're welcome.
We have a motion.
I'll move that we approve and forward to the warrant committee the FY15 Conservation Commission budget in the amount of $2,500.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
All, it's unanimous. Number 6 on the agenda is the approval of the sewer amnesty program. I'd like to invite up our DPW Director, Joe Lynch, and our Town Council, John Flynn. Joe, can you tell us and the public, can you just give us a brief synopsis of why we're here tonight and why we're talking about sewer amnesty program?
Sure. I think the amnesty program is one aspect of the bigger issue, and the bigger issue is the discovery by the hard work of people in the Board of Health and DPW that there are properties in town that are suspect. And I want to be clear on that, suspect, worthy of investigation. There are 20
Suspect of?
of being in an area where there's small lots, therefore septic systems don't make a lot of sense, on streets that have sewer in the street, but nonetheless don't have sewer bills or, in fact, show up on the septic system inventory list kept by the Board of Health. And it's a melding of that data electronically that's allowed us to parse through basically 10,000 accounts and to be able to determine what's low-hanging fruit, the ones that are obvious, and the ones that are less obvious, the high-hanging fruit that take a little more effort to harvest.
Joe, can we back up just a second?
Sure.
Could you explain, because there's a lot of speculation out there, because we've been getting tons of emails on this thing, I mean tons, as to how it was discovered, you said it was,
Sure. In fact, during Citizen Speak, one of the speakers suggested, how could this possibly have happened? How did we not know? And he actually made reference to a phrase that I've not coined, but use perhaps recklessly, and that is the weekend warrior. There's a lot of things that happen, whether it's putting a new kitchen in, or a bathroom in, or refurbishing your windows, that don't necessarily get permits, but those things happen. And the same thing happens in the heavier construction. Water services get changed over, fences get installed, driveways get redone, all on the weekends. And little knowledge do we have on that unless we happen upon them. And how this happened was pure serendipity. We had a family situation that was changing. Mom was going into an alternative form of housing, and then the family was left with liquidating the property. And the issue came up that the real estate broker doing diligence, filling out a form, simple as that, filled out the form and, does it have public water? Yes. Public sewer? Yes. Gas? Yes. So on and so forth, along with number of bedrooms and so on. And I guess in marketing real estate nowadays, they ask, well, what's the average cost of running your household? So a lot of sellers make their utility bills available. Well, the broker said, well, you're not getting a sewer bill. And the daughter of the owner, well, yeah, we're connected to sewer, verified with mom. Yeah, we're connected to sewer and have been for a long time, and lo and behold, they come to us, and we have no record of it, no permit, no plan, no as-built, all the things which all along the way are required to get a connection. Come to find out, it was in mid-'70s when that all happened. Simple because of the initiative of the homeowner looking to sell, they invited, because the septic system wouldn't work on the lot and the house is unsaleable without one. We did a dye test. Went in, simply put colored dye in the toilet, flushed the toilet, popped the downstream manhole, and it flowed the dye color. So we were able to verify that. So in the context of, and by the way, that house was shown up on the Board of Health inventory as having a septic system. So Mike Blanchard and I got to talking about that, kind of scratching our head. And Mike said, well, my list is out of date, and I recognize that. And I'm saying, well, yeah, it sounds like we've got another thing going on here as well. And we've started thinking in spatial concepts of GIS, graphical informations, and what used to be onerous of hand sorting and parsing through everything. We were able to pull it out electronically. And in doing that, we were able to determine there were about 452, not about, there were 452 accounts that are worth looking at, 22 of which we were able to determine immediately by virtue of the fact we had sewer tie cards over various eras, that people appeared to have done it properly, submitted the as-built for the record, and they just weren't put on the rolls. Leaving 29 other properties that are in areas where, for no reason should a septic system work, they're highly suspect, and going to take a little more effort to go in and verify.
Because of the small lots, because there's sewer on the street.
Exactly.
Now, let me ask
And
you a
no
question.
odor problems, and the houses have sold recently without Title V certificates, so there are things that make them more suspect than normal. Leaving, and this is what Mr. Johanning was perhaps referring to, is our Board of Health regulations require, if you have a failed Title V, meaning state septic system, if it fails that test on a refi or conveyance, and you are within 500 feet of a municipal sewer, the 500 feet is a local bylaw, you must connect to the sewer. So by putting an algorithm into this map, you're able to determine, well, all those target properties, show me those that are within 500 feet of sewer that are likely candidates that either have connected or would have to connect. And that number is 216 properties. But already we ruled out that there are 236 of which highly unlikely. It's still worth looking at, but towards the end of this process. So that's how we stumbled upon it.
I'm getting lost in the numbers. So there are 400 and some odd that were?
452 were the original targets, leaving 216 that were 500 feet that were worth looking at a little bit more, leaving the 236, strike that, 236 were unlikely to have sewer, 216 that were within 500 feet and possibly were connected. Of those 216, 22 of those have been confirmed to be connected, and 29 of that 216 are highly suspect to have been connected. So still leaving approximately 50, let's say, still leaving about 160 properties in that highly suspect area worth looking at in a little more detail. So that's the population that we're interested in.
About 160 homes.
Additional
Yeah.
homes.
Okay.
Okay, the raw number being 216, that's likely to be that prime crop.
Yep.
So that's how we found it. The situation is, how far back do we collect? The simple truth is other than the 22 services that we have record of, that, a drawing that shows when they, that it was connected and usually has a date on it, other than those 22, we would be speculating. We'd be relying completely on the homeowner's answer of, I connected last year, I connected 20 years ago. We would never know how far back they connected. It would be purely an honor system.
Without actually digging up the line and maybe getting an idea of...
Depending on the type of pipe they used, if they're using the newer PVC pipes, some of those have date stamps on them, like lots. You can kind of narrow it down within a couple of years. But that would be an invasive, I mean, you would literally have to dig up those services.
Right.
So the thought was, how far back should you go? How far back can you go? And to what extent is the middle ground and all of that? So we asked council the dubious question, what's the statute of limitations? And the answer was, depends on what you call it. If it's a pure utility, there was some thought, not tried and not tested, and there's some thought there is no statute of limitations, it's a service, and you can go back and recapture that. But the more, I'm not going to say logical, but the less onerous position on that was, when you consider sale of utility for a fee to be a contract, and in Massachusetts, contracts have statutes of limitations of 6 years. So that's how the 6 years came to be put on the table. I don't think there'll be any argument that it's a contract. Just again, there's always an argument. John makes a living at that. But the truth is, I think that we could take a firm stand on the 6 years being the statute as an implied contract. So what's left is, we have this target population, some of which who absolutely know they did it deliberately, and they're the so-called scofflaws. And there are some who very well could have legitimately hired a contractor who the contractor didn't follow procedures. So, how do you sort through all of that? So we felt that the starting point was 6 years. And I hate the agendas when they say approval, because I think this is a discussion, an issue. There's a lot to digest here. I think the thought is that, short of going out and doing intensive dye testing and field reconnaissance work and excavations of pipes to find them, and again, if we don't have any record, how do you know where to dig to find the pipe? Is another question, right? We thought that there might be some discussion of an amnesty program, like they do with a lot of things in the federal government, whether it's immigration or whatnot, to allow people to come forward on their own volition, and by doing so, to offer some relaxation.
Can I ask a question just in terms of the statute, and whether it's a contract, whether it's a service? The closest thing I could think of that people steal quite frequently is cable. Has there been any litigation over cable that would, because it would seem to be similar, it's either a contract, well, I mean, cable's even more of a contract than, so is there a statute on stealing cable service or not?
I'm not aware of one that has a statute of limitations on it. I just don't know that.
Because I can't imagine, well, maybe none of those are being litigated, but.
I have a question, Joe, about the 22 that you know are definitely hooked up. Now, can you just clarify, are those ones that the town knew about? You said there was a sewer tie card?
Right.
What exactly does that mean?
What we did is, once we had the list generated of the targets, we simply then got into the tedious task of looking at, flip through the permit records, permit archives, by street, is there a permit? And then look through the sewer tie cards which every one that was done legitimately, we'd have an as-built, basically a sketch of where the pipe is underground as it relates to the house and into the street. And based on the permit and the tie cards, we were able to parse that list down by 22. We verified that over time, the town was aware of these, and for whatever reason, probably carelessness, just weren't put on the sewer rolls. Those properties have all been put on the sewer rolls already. They've all received one sewer bill already, and it's amazing my phone hasn't rung once for someone saying, I'm suddenly getting a sewer bill I never used to get.
And Joe, what's the time frame of those? Do the tie cards, are they all over the map in terms
All
of
over the
when they
map.
were tied in?
But 20, 30-plus years.
So none recently?
Oh, God, nothing recently.
They're all 20 to 30 years old?
More than 10 of the 22, all more than 10.
Joe, what about the remaining, we said 216? How long will it take you to find out if they're on the sewer system or not?
Assuming no amnesty program and nobody comes forward on their own volition, and it's a bit of a stock assumption, but let's start there. Even if you did 2 a week, you're probably looking at a couple of years to go through those, and that's assuming you have to do excavation and everything.
But you have addresses, 216
Sure,
addresses.
sure, we have targets. And what I want to point out, because there's been a lot of speculation, or maybe, I'll even say reckless criticisms out there in the public, people who've seen a map. Well, the map that they've seen, apparently, is a map that the targets, they either are on the septic list, or don't, or, being the operative word, or don't get a sewer bill. And sure, there are properties that have been singled out, sometimes even in the press or on blogs online, where it's just no source coming from us that was the case. But there are campus setting properties that have outbuildings, and very well could be on septic systems. But while we're in this, if that property building shows up as a building, we ought to be able to verify that's connected or not. So they're on some of that higher hanging fruit. But some people have been running off saying that, no, those, esteemed institutions are somehow, skating on this.
But the 22, they're back on the tax roll?
They're sewer rolls, sewer
the sewer
billing
rolls,
rolls.
yeah.
That's correct.
Same thing.
They've gotten letters that said that the matter is still before the Board of Selectmen. The town is reserving the right to determine how far back it might go in
Has
in
anybody
collecting.
come forward on their own volition?
That's why I said, on that assumption that nobody was going to come forward, we did have one person, not going to give his address, not give his name, it's an ongoing investigation, I think it's reckless to give specifics, but we did have one person coming forward who had a sizable piece of real estate that he was selling, was on the 11th hour of the sale, and he came forward to us and said,
I need to sell.
I don't want this to screw up the sale. I'll be willing to pay 1 year in arrears.
And you said?
We added him onto the rolls, we took his check for the 1 year, and we did say that the selectmen are still considering how far back to go. Now, at this point, that person doesn't own the property anymore.
So, okay, so we've got 1 year where he's gone.
But he came forward on his own volition because
Right.
he himself did not want, he had heard about this. And we've had the converse of that true as well. We had a situation on another property where the homeowner thought they were connected to sewer, and through some really convoluted research, almost in the opposite fashion of this, we were able to verify that they are not connected to sewer. In the end, that they were perfectly legit, to the extent, though, they do have a failed septic system, and they do have to connect.
Joe, what's the average sewer bill per year? Is it 5,000 or 6,000?
Oh, no,
Sewer?
for sewer alone, no, I'd say it's on average 1,000, depending on that.
1,000.
Yeah, 1,000 per year. Some single,
Yep.
person households, much less multifamily households,
So it
much
could be
more.
100. It could be 100,000.
Could be 100,000 a year.
a year. And is it worth? And I believe it is. You putting one of your staff or two of your staff full time on this to weed out the 100 or 216, whatever you have.
The beauty of this is it hasn't taken anywhere near that kind of dedication to parse this out. Once we get into the field work, I
Right.
believe, when I said doing a couple of week, I think we could fit that within our existing
But then
workload.
to confirm that they either are or aren't,
Yep.
it will take that long.
Right. Or we would have to either staff up, or we could consider consulting it out.
Yeah.
even a, I think out of the box, and sometimes I get in trouble by doing it. We could actually do like a bounty system, consultant gets to get a percentage of what they recover.
I think this needs your utmost attention going forward because people are upset. As Tom said earlier, we're getting a ton of emails about this. And if it's 100,000 and it costs you an extra 30 or 40,000 to sub it out to somebody, it might be worth it.
Now, let's talk a little bit about logistics too, just in terms of these 216, we really have no idea, well, assuming that there's 216 out there that aren't connected, but we don't, well, are connected and aren't getting bills, but we don't even know that at this point. We know there's probably some number out there.
I think of that 216, I think the number you could be confident is 29 probably, 29 additional probably, and that's in addition to the 22 we already found.
And the rest are,
And the others
we don't have a
are
clue.
somewhat likely, but it's going to diminish as you get further up that list or down that list.
Right,
So
okay,
it's probably around 100 customers.
okay. Now, and we have no evidence that these people, assuming that they are connected what they thought was legally, and the town screwed up, we just, and just didn't record the paperwork, we just don't know at this point, right?
We don't know, and short of launching into investigations and subpoenaing contractors' records, if the homeowner says, well, I hired so-and-so, and the company may never be around anymore. I don't think we could ever be able to determine that, other than hear the homeowner's position on that and make a determination on a case-by-case basis.
So potentially, I guess, and this is what I'm trying to, I guess, get at and think about whether it makes any sense or not. If we're saying on average sewer bill's about $1,000 a year, we go back 6 years, that's $6,000 plus interest. And if we have to launch an investigation, and I guess that's another question, can we just make the allegation and let the customer prove otherwise, or do we have to have, the customer says, no, I connected legally, and who has the benefit, who has the burden of proof, I guess?
I hear you. Our sewer regulations allow us to maintain our sewer and allow us to conduct various tests. So if a customer is unwilling or uncooperative to allow us to come into the house to do a dye test to verify then they are or not, they don't have to allow us into the house. However, under those circumstances, we would then be forced to having to go out in the street and do a smoke test, pump smoke into the sewer system, and drive up the street and see the smoke coming up everybody's, well, their pipes, their sanitary stacks.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty good verification they're connected. It's an absolute verification.
So I guess my question, say you come to me and I let you in my house, and lo and behold, I'm hooked up to sewerage, and say you hooked up and you haven't been getting the bill, and I say, well, I didn't know that, and or I thought I was paying my bill and I've been hooked up legally. I had a contract to do it, and I thought all the paperwork was filed. So if I make that claim, and I say, I'm not going to go back and pay 6 years, it's your fault, who has the burden of proof? Does the town have the burden of proof, or should this get litigated?
We would have the burden of proof if we're making the claim.
Okay.
If we're seeking the money.
So we would have to do the research, we would have to pay for the research to get a $6,000 plus interest claim back. And that research could cost how much? I know it's speculation, obviously, but...
I think you're doing smoke testing.
But all we're proving is, we're not proving anything. All we're proving is
They are connected.
they're connected, but we're not proving whose fault it was.
I'm sure fault comes into.
Yeah,
into
I
play.
guess that's a good
The
question.
The regulations say, if you're connected to the sewer, you must follow this procedure to connect to the sewer. And
Right,
if you-
and I'm saying I did.
And if you deviate,
But
I think the record would say otherwise.
I'm saying I did. I hired a contractor. I assumed the contract. I'm not a contractor. I don't know anything about sewers. I assume he knew what he was doing, and he did it.
I think, well, one of the aspects of this that we talked very early on is there ought to be somebody to hear appeals. before they go to litigation to hear an appeal. We certainly would welcome any documentation someone brought in. If someone brought in, if they had that paperwork available, were able to find out that contractor X was paid, and look right there, it says permit fee. That would bear some consideration.
Or I guess on the other hand, coming in and saying, yeah, I'm connected, but I connected 2 years ago. How are we going to prove it?
I think it's not a legal search or seizure, but we do have aerial reconnaissance that goes back over the past 10 years, every 3 years, so we could actually visually see any patches that occurred in the street over that historic time. So we can take it beyond the 6 years with aerial photography and verify that's not the case.
Okay.
Or it is the case.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, have you thought about a tier system whereby, say you have 216 so-called scofflaws or potential, you put them all on 6 years and let them come in and prove differently under the appeal process. And that way you'll weed them out very easily. If they're guilty, they'll agree to the 6 years. If they're not guilty, well, then you'll know soon enough because they'll have to come in front of you because they're already fined.
Yeah, I think we did think of it, of a tier system of sorts. Clearly, anybody who's purchased a house recently or within whatever that threshold is.
Well, exactly. That's what I was going to get
They should pay
at.
only what they, from the time that they've owned it.
Correct.
They shouldn't have to go back. I just think that's a matter of fairness. So that tier is an easy one to deal with. One that's less easy is that if we're talking 6 years, that everybody goes back 6 years, then there are those 22 the town was aware of. Do we relax it because the town was aware of it? Are there circumstances that are extenuating that, but I think that would be maybe a second tier. Maybe you take it back 5 years instead of 6 for the 22 that the town knew of.
What if you sent out a letter to all 216 and said, this is what's going to happen. We're going to fine you 6 years of back payments, okay? If you come forward before it takes effect, we can reduce it. Only if you come forward before it takes effect. So that's one tier. Sure. The first tier, obviously, would be the 6 years, the people that just agree to pay. And then the third tier would be, if you lived in the house 2 years, we can only go back 2 years. That's it.
I think, the phrase that's been coined is the amnesty program. I think it was looking to do exactly that, was to give people the incentive to come forward on their own, to offer some sort of, I don't want to say reward, but some sort of relaxation of how far back we would go, but in exchange for lessening our burden of having to discover this and document it.
Right.
So yeah, we thought about that. What we've been struggling with is what is that number? From the time that this thing was first rolled out by me publicly at a meeting here in mid-September through various times it's come up in discussion, culminating in a TV news article a couple of weeks ago. The feedback I'm hearing from people out there is they want us to go back to the full extent that we can. So with that in mind, I think we're looking at something on 6, something relaxed a little bit if they come forward, maybe it's 5. And then those, of course, who own it less simply go back to the time they own it.
See, I had as I read through this agreement, that's the problem I had with the agreement is, if I come forward, I pay 3 years. If I don't come forward, I pay 3 years.
Right.
No,
That doesn't work.
That doesn't
I say some interest. I say 14% of $6,000. What be? I'm not coming forward.
I think that's what we just said, Tom. If you don't come forward, it's 6 years. If you come forward, we'll consider 3 years, something like that.
Yeah, that would make more sense.
Because we're saving a lot of money in determining if they're on the sewer or not. Let them come to us.
And you have a 90-day period, a 60-day period, whatever it is, to come forward.
I think the starting point should be 6 years, and Joe, you clarified, but let's repeat it. This is a 3-page draft of a recommended program, and it's clearly for discussion. It's not my intention, probably not your intention to vote on it tonight. There's been some miscommunication, that we've had from some people who think that this is in final form, and this is our first real discussion of this publicly. I've talked with you, I'm sure others have talked with you individually, and you were here back in September to identify the problem. So I had that concern too, and even the section 1, that was a 1-year look back if the town knew about the connection. I guess, Joe, with section 1, you were probably talking about those 22 homes that the town had some knowledge about 20 or 30 years ago.
That is correct.
Okay.
That's what section 1 was intending to address.
I guess the flip side of that is, you know, people may have notified the town that they connected, say, 20 years ago, or more than, you said more than 10, so more than 10 years ago. They still have been getting bills that only say water and don't say sewer, and they've had the benefit of the sewer charges for a significant period of time without paying for that service. So although the town might have some responsibility here, I think the homeowners still have some responsibility as well. So I would think that we should start with 6 years.
My gut reaction, if you try to litigate that, you would lose.
Well, but before we get to litigation, I think there's a few steps in the middle here. So we set aside the group of people who are new homeowners who maybe in the past year bought a home. You would think some of this would come out in the due diligence of buying the home, but who knows? We don't know what the specific facts in a given case might be. So we have that group of people that's off on the side. But I think for everyone else, if we start with 6 years, and whether it's a tiered system or whether it's a matter of, for instance, where is the appeals? Section 3, where we talk about establishing an appeal process to consider special circumstances. Joe, you've written in here grievances, hardships, dispute of facts. I think if we were to have an appeals officer, if we were to start with the 6 years, except for the new homeowners, and have an appeals process where people can come in, maybe there's a means testing for some people who might argue that there's a particular hardship to pay 6 years. Maybe there's special facts that mitigate against the 6 years in a particular case. And that's the amnesty program that you're really talking about. And then I think, Dennis, you're talking about through your tiered system. So you could do a tiered system where you could say, we're starting with 6 years, and we'll treat it individually on a case-by-case basis after that through an appeals officer. I don't think we have to decide tonight which course we want to do, but that's one option. This, I think, would be another option.
Joe, what kind of would it be an engineer determines if it's on the sewer or septic? Who would determine?
It would be the Public Works Department, sewer division, so
If
it would be
somebody
a
had-
combination of field workers.
Right.
It may be a supervisor or a foreman, but ultimately it would come in through the findings would come in through the engineering department.
If a homeowner had to hire somebody privately, who could they hire?
Anybody on our drain layers license list, which we publicize every year. So to dig out in the right of way.
And they would give you an affidavit?
Well, we would want to inspect the connection as well. They would dig it up, we'd want to physically inspect it, just like we'd on a new connection.
Now, why does that have to be dug up? I mean, I thought isn't it cheaper to just do the dye test and see if they're connected, or?
I think that's, don't want to mix metaphors here of testing, but you can either dye test, smoke test,
Dig it up.
or dig it up.
Well, which is cheaper, I guess?
Dye test first, if they're unwilling, smoke testing second, and then lastly, digging it up would be most expensive and may not conclude, because nobody would know where along the street that there's a sewer connection actually come out. We would be looking for buried treasure without a map,
Right, so I would think.
literally.
Yeah, I would think that, and again, I guess we're talking about these people that won't come forward. What do we do?
Right.
I have a bunch of questions on the agreement. The first one was, that I had was under section 2, considering the full statute of limitations for people that don't come forward. But then, as I got to section 2, 2 little I.
So 2B, little I.
2B, 2 little I. So, and just so I understand it, these are places where the selectman can, or a committee appointed by the selectman can reduce or change things. If the customer's water account is in good standing, not in lien, and has been paid in full, it doesn't indicate, are late payments an issue in that case? I mean, I can have a history of late payments, but not have any liens because I'm...
This language, again, this started out as just a bunch of bullets as we identify problems, and the question became is, okay, well, if you put people on some sort of forgiveness or leniency program, which we have done similarly for, aggrieved customers who have difficulty paying their bills.
But they're in good stand.
That they have to have been in good standing, they have to have been a good customer before we
Okay.
would enter into that
And my
agreement.
question is, what does late payments affect good standing? It's just not defined, that's all.
It has under those other circumstances.
Okay. I think we just, if we're going to have it in here, I think we have to define it.
Define it better, sure.
Because it really, I mean, I could not have a lien, but have made a lot of late payments. Everything can be paid in full currently, so it's, and the second one, under 2A,
Are you on page 2?
yeah, I'm still right under that, it's
Okay.
2IA, small a in parentheses.
Board?
If the board makes a determination that circumstances warrant relaxation of the provision to collect the 12 prior billing quarters, then the customer shall be subject to charges for sewer service for not more than 4 billing quarters. That seems to be language that was exactly the same as in above. I mean,
Yeah, I think the paragraph
is.
below it is duplicative as well.
It is, basically, you have two different species. You have the ones who don't come forward, and we don't give them that relaxation, and the ones that do come forward, we give them this relaxation. And again, the number, I wouldn't dwell on, because whether it's 6 or...
right, no, I'm not dwelling on the number. I'm just saying, how does little a relate to small 2? I don't see how it's a subsection of small 2. It just doesn't seem to fit here.
No, I think it should be subsection C. And then the next paragraph, B, should really be subsection D, because they're different.
Yeah, they just don't make any sense. And then B, the small b, if the property owner has owned the property less than 3 years, the owner shall be subject to charge of sewer bill for the then current sewer rate not more than that he's owned the property. Again, that's just a repeat of something.
It's a
that was-
repeat of A on page 1, 2A on page 1.
So I have problems with both of those.
Problem with the format, correct? I mean, just...
It
that
just
they don't-
doesn't seem to fit under 2 little I.
Okay.
And it's just repeated, from someplace else in the document.
But this can be cleaned up, I think.
Yeah.
The substance of it is the bigger thing right now.
So then the other one I had was, well, I guess the biggest problem I had was the accrual of interest.
Which one is this?
This is on, this is 4, the repayment plan. Okay, first just housekeeping. Under 4, in any event, in order to qualify for the repayment plan under this section 5, well, it's actually this section 4. But then under 1 little I, the account must be in good standing. All prior bills and accrued interest charges must be paid and not in lien status. If we've never received a sewer bill, how could that possibly be anyways?
Actually, I did have a entry into that, it said the water account must be in good standing as a way to clarify, because there is no basis if they haven't been getting a sewer bill. You're
Right.
correct.
Right. And then under 3 little I in that same section, the accrual of interest, which I understand, the interest accrues and that gets forgiven. Should the account fail to remain in good standing, including without limitation of any monthly payments not made on time, then no adjustment of interest will be made. I mean, taken to its absurd ending, I could miss my last payment, and then I'm going to get assessed for 100% of the interest. The other question is, most contracts build in some kind of a grace period if I'm a day late. If I'm a day late on my very last payment, I'm going to get charged the whole 14%. I mean, that sounds kind of draconian. you know, if I'm using this as an enticement to pay. And then the second part was, should I sell my house within the payment plan? I owe all the interest. Why? What does selling my house? I mean, I agree, it should be part of the closing.
No, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm probably not using the correct language there. The intent of that last piece is if you sell it, you owe the full balance due. If you have failed to make payments and you have interest that is accrued, that's not subject to being waived, that you owe that as well. So if you, in fact, are making payments under the terms of 3 faithfully, and to the point that, you know, interest, if that's where you go, if the interest is intended to be waived, and you've tied payments timely, then you would not be owing any accrued
Right,
interest.
but it says the full balance plus any accrued interest.
The accrued interest up to that point.
Well, again, why should you? You were gonna.
If you're paying in good faith, your point is if they're paying in good faith, we would have forgiven it if you took it out full term.
Right.
Just because you're selling a house and you have made payments in good faith, they should be, you know, subject to any waiver of interest in accordance with
Yeah.
3 above.
Yes.
All right, so clean that up.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of cleanup that needs to happen on this thing, but I guess the bigger issue is,
But again-
should it go 6 years, and then
Right.
3 years if somebody comes forward, 6 years or 4 years or something? I mean, there has to be some substantial enticement to come forward, I think.
Voluntarily under the amnesty program.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Right.
should that be 4 or 5 years? And then subject to mitigation if someone is in that, if someone does come forward, but still has a hardship or has particular facts that they want to bring to the attention of the appeals officer. I want to go to number 3. The Board of Selectmen will establish an appeals committee. Now, if we establish a committee, that would be a committee that's open, subject to the open meeting law, it would be a public committee, whereas if we had one person as an appeals officer, that really
I had the same.
would be not subject to the open meeting law and would give a little bit more privacy to people coming forward who might have financial information or other information like that that they'd want to share. So that's something we should think about, whether we'd want a committee or just an appeal officer.
Yeah.
Or just one person designated to
My
hear.
suggestion was the assistant town administrator to be the appeal officer, and then it'd be reviewed by the town administrator, the decision, but, yeah.
The other, well, feeding into that is, the last sentence says, determinations reached by the appeals committee shall be final and binding. And one thing I raised with Joe was, well, if this board is the water and sewer commissioners, shouldn't we be the final arbiter
Right.
on this? Now, it may be that people wouldn't want to come as far as, if they go through talk with DPW, talk with whoever we might designate as an appellate hearing officer, for whatever terminology we come up with, then it may stop at that level, but probably at the end of the day, if someone really does want to pursue it, it probably needs to come to this board for a final decision.
Completely understand. I wrote this in the context that the sewer commissioners, the Board of Selectmen, as commissioners, would also hear appeals, where the discussion that we're having now seems to be that we'll have somebody who is a hearing officer makes a recommendation to the sewer commissioners, and the sewer commissioner's decision will be binding.
Anything else, Katie?
I didn't have anything else.
No? But I think we should.
Do we want to have a discussion now about whether it should be,
Right.
what that time period should be, or just?
We gotta
have
give 'em a
the
charge.
agreement Come back?
I think
and-
so, because we have another meeting next week, and then the 21st.
Well,
And
we've-
Joe, you'd like to get this in place by February 1st,
I'd like to. I mean, there's no haste in it, and this is a long-running issue, but I want to move forward on it. Whatever the beginning date is, if we're looking at a 90-day period to allow people to come forward, it would be as of the date that this gets enacted.
Are you going to send this to all 216 homeowners?
I think we need to.
Yeah.
I think we need to.
You've ruled out,
I don't think we'd send it to the full 452 at this point, the 216, which are that next category. And then, having done that and concluded that aspect of it, we may decide it makes sense to go a little bit further, depending on what we find.
Yeah, and that they'd have, be it 60 or 90 days from the receipt of that notification to,
Sure.
what are you going to say in that notice?
I don't know yet, but it's something to the effect that, we've discovered, you may have heard of this issue, we have discovered that your property is one of those properties that bears investigation. And, you know, to that end, if you know you're connected, there's a program that if you come forward and tell us that, you know, we invite you to do so. And then spell out whether it's 3 or 4 or whatever that number is, years that we go back, you spell it right out. And if they simply don't know, they may still invite us in to do the dye test. I think that's valid too, if they invite us into their house.
That they still be,
I
If they
got your
don't-
letter, but I don't know, they might say.
If they don't invite you in, you're assuming they're,
Then then they're not eligible for
Guilty.
any relaxation, I
Right.
would say. I think that's where we're going with this. You know, beyond that 90 days, if we hear nothing from them, we're going to assume that they're not going to invite us and they're not going to come
Yeah.
forward.
I guess if they get the letter and voluntarily come forward and say, I don't know, they're voluntarily coming forward, and at least, yeah.
I think it's reasonable. I mean, if they truly don't know, but they want to solve the problem, right, and invite us in to do that test to conclude one way or the other, that seems to be a reasonable approach.
is the board reasonably in favor of starting with 6 years? And then if you come forward,
I'm in
Possibly
favor of
doing-
starting with 6 years, yes.
then,
As a starting point, I would be, yes.
and if you come forward, 3 to 4 or 5 years?
I would say
whatever.
4, but
4, okay.
4 is fair.
Yeah, it gives people something, and it's not insignificant, but it's not
Okay.
overly
Yeah.
generous considering
You're
the
saving,
facts
on
here.
average, $2,000 plus the accrued interest.
And then the last one would be the people that have lived in their homes for less than the 6 years.
Sure.
You go back to full amount.
Still going to be on table for a couple more, at least one more selection meeting, so make these drafts and clean it up until we can have a more productive discussion specifically and hopefully put this in bed
Okay.
before.
And I
before
gave
the end
Anne
of
Marie
the
all my bullet points on that I.
So you're going to clean up the
that document.
contract. We've talked about 6 years, 4 years, and then the third tier, which is the homeowners that have been there not too long. The appeals committee, whether it's one person or, do you want to go with one person?
I think it
Or-
should not be a committee, but should be a
An appeals officer.
appeals officer.
An
yes.
appeals officer. They will make a determination and bring it to us for final vetting.
I can make a recommendation.
A recommendation, bring it to us.
A recommendation that you people would act on, much like the traffic commission, where you would act on the recommendation coming out. Don't always agree, but most times, you have reliance in the process.
And again, I would think that's something that we could, as the water commissioners, we could turn that over to the town administrator to have the final approval authority on it.
Instead of coming to us.
Yeah.
I think that would be better.
Because otherwise it has to be at a public meeting.
Exactly. And how long are you going to give these people to come forward, and how long before they're actually going to be on before they'll have to pay?
I've framed this out that it's 90 days for them to come forward. You
Yep.
might say that's too liberal, but that's what I've just offered as a starting point. Once that's in place and once we've discovered that they are in fact connected to sewer, they will be immediately put on the sewer rolls for the current charges, and the bill will be issued based on the calculation of whether they're a 4-year customer or a 6-year customer. The bill would be issued to that effect, which would probably trigger the appeal process. Now, we probably should
Right.
establish what time limitations, maybe the statute, by statute, what the time limitation is to file such an appeal.
Joe, will this be sent out by certified mail backed up with regular mail?
It's going to be sent out regular mail, because certified mail, I mean, we're literally looking at, what, $14,000?
I'm just saying, say you have, hypothetically speaking, 216 people you're going to send it to, and you don't hear back from 50. Are they automatically going to be on this, assume that they're on the sewer system, and you're going to start billing them?
If we don't hear from them?
If you don't hear from them.
We haven't had that discussion, that if we don't, I haven't contemplated that, and I think that's premature to just automatically put them on the rolls without some sort of evidence, whether it's smoke test confirmed, or a dye test confirmed, or they're coming forward on their own volition confirmed.
So you will not put anybody on the sewer rolls unless you do the test?
That's correct.
That's correct, okay. But what if you just don't hear from anybody and they won't let you into their house, what happens then?
Or are unable to conclude?
Yeah.
Smoke test should be able to conclude that.
How does that work? How does the smoke test work?
There's a stretch of roadway, and along that stretch of roadway, there's one house that's a target. You would pressurize the downstream manhole with the smoke pump.
Yeah.
You pump the system up, the smoke just permeates up the system and up the stack, so you see the houses smoking, the stack smoking. Doesn't get into the house, it just goes right up the stack.
Right.
So the target house, if it has smoke coming up, you verify that they're connected. You have conclusively verified they're connected.
If it doesn't come out, you've smoked them out of the house.
You do have an issue with, just because, I don't even want to get into it.
Nobody got
But the
that.
truth is, if they didn't connect the sewer properly, they may not have done their plumbing properly. They may have a dry trap, may have no trap. It could fill their house with smoke. And when those phone calls ring at the fire station, we've also proved they're connected to the sewer. Well, the fire department would know when they're doing smoke testing in which neighborhoods, by the way. That's the
So
standard
it's
procedure.
important to know, I think, that nobody will be put on the sewer rolls unless there's a test done on their properties.
That's safe to say, yes. That's
If you don't hear, if they don't let you in, you're going to do a smoke test, and you'll determine it that way. Correct?
Correct.
Good with that?
I'm fine with that, yeah.
Now, for the appeals process, do we need some kind of guidelines? We can think about this, obviously, and talk about it more at the next time, but do we need some kind of guidelines on what mitigation, we've gotten in here grievances, make determinations on concerns, grievances, hardships, disputed facts,
Probably should.
something similar to that, but there might be some other
Something objective.
language that we want to add in here.
Now, how do we feel in terms of, according to this, you can't even come forward for an appeal unless you first come forward voluntarily? Right, well, I guess I'm taking 2B as the appeals process. The selectmen may decide to issue charges for less than 12 prior billing quarters. I'm taking that as the appeal process, but
I
could
think
be
some of this
incorrect.
might be coming out or being revised, so I don't think we should be too wedded to this particular language. But I was looking more at section 3 about the
Yes.
appeals process. We might need to build in some guidelines for whether it's the assistant town administrator or whoever it might be, so that that person has some written guidelines, even though it'll be case by case.
yeah.
So are we clear?
But if that's the case, 2, and if we're going to change it, 2 seems to be kind of tying into the appeals. But, it almost reads, if you didn't come forward voluntarily, don't even try for an appeal, because we have no authority to grant you any relief because of 2.
That wasn't my intention of the structure of this.
But it does say that
But
the Board of Selectmen may decide to issue charges so less than 12 prior billing quarters for those customers coming forward of their own volition.
Yeah,
So
but
if they don't,
Then 3 applies.
does it? Okay.
I mean, I think we view this as the initial draft,
Yes.
which is probably going to, the final part, it will probably look a lot different than this.
Chairman, should this draft name the assistant town administrator as a hearings officer, just for your
That's what I'm
consideration?
hearing from my board members, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. Are you in favor of that?
Yeah, I think it's a good suggestion, especially where he is the former health director. He's got some experience with septic inspections. He's probably the right one to have,
I think
if in
he's the
case an
perfect guy,
inspection has
actually.
to be had, or if he has
It's
to
a
go
good
out.
point that he was the health director, yeah.
In the situation where the owner bought the property less than 6 years ago, what's the board's sense of,
Well, then you're going to go back
to the number of
6
years
years.
since they've owned it.
and so on down the line, to when they
And
bought
so
it?
on, yeah.
So if they've owned it 5 years, go back 5
Five.
years.
Go back 5
Yeah.
years.
Or if they voluntarily come forward, then go back to 4, if they've owned it for at least 4, I guess.
Yes. Because we're doing that for the other people as well. Correct.
What about, Joe, you said, so you've already sent bills to these 22 people who were pretty confirmed, or are on the sewer system. I don't know how this works, but in terms of putting a lien on the property, since we've already now started billing at least those 22, does it make sense to put a lien, sewer lien, sewer charges lien
But
at this point, or should we be thinking about
They've
that?
never
for-
previously been billed, so I'm not sure it's subject to lien. Wouldn't be
But
subject
after at least a
until,
quarter?
until next year. Next December is when you go to lien, once a year. So you could be in arrears, you'd be accruing interest for the course of a full year, and then next December, end of November, early December, it's when all the properties go to lien. So that's when it would happen.
As long as you're in good standing either with a payment plan or paid in full, obviously.
That's correct.
Then it's not lienable.
That's right.
The
But what
lien-
about the previous years that
Well,
we're
the-
looking to go back?
The lien applies to unpaid bills, is what Joe was trying to say. And we haven't been billed, so we can't lien something that they haven't been billed for.
So we can just negotiate with them for the prior 5 years or 6 years, whatever it comes out to be.
We can actually tell what the bill should be because we know the water usage.
We know what the water usage was. We can calculate that. One thing
Well, so should we be issuing a bill for 6 years then, going back, for the total amount?
well, that was,
And then once
that was
that
the
bill
goal.
is issued, then
Yes.
we can do
Yes.
then we can do a lien a year later.
That's
That's
correct.
correct. Yes.
Okay, we clear?
Sounds good.
Thanks, Joe. You can stay where you are.
One thing that didn't get clarified is on a repayment plan, if we're going 6 years, do we want to give people 6 years to pay it back? If we're going 4 years, do we want to give them 4 years to pay it back? Do we want it to pay back
Well, I guess first of
payable
all,
in full within 30 days, otherwise it's subject to interest and lien at the end of the year?
That's a good point.
I guess, yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, I don't know.
I think you should make it
Persons who are
6
not
years
owned-
for everybody, you know. You're gaining interest for,
Be easier to track if everyone was treated the same.
exactly. It'll be simpler. That would be my preference, but
Well, the way we have it written right now, the repayment plan is only for people who are either in 2A or 2B, which are voluntary, people who voluntarily come forward. So a person that didn't voluntarily come forward, the way this agreement's written, isn't eligible for a repayment plan.
Oh, but, so,
So you'd go back 4 years for, I guess it would be a 4-year repayment plan for, well, I guess you can do what you want, but you can make it more than that, but.
I think we'd want to offer a repayment plan to even people who didn't come forward voluntarily,
Right.
just
Okay. But that would,
because at the
again,
end
have
of
to
the
be
day, we want
amended
to
in this
collect the
agreement.
money, we might not be able to do it all at once.
Mhm.
Well, so we should vary this, this is just a draft.
exactly. When can you get this draft together, John? And Joe?
When is the board next meet?
January 7th.
7th and 21st?
Definitely be on the 21st. And the
21st.
7th, Joe. Good news.
We'll try on the 7th, but the 21st, without a doubt.
Okay.
Try for the 7th, yeah.
For
We'll-
the 7th agenda, we would need to have the draft by this Friday.
They're not having it.
Let's say the 21st. There may even be issues we think about after this that we want to
That's more
talk to
realistic.
Joe about or talk to
Okay.
John about, and, yeah.
We good?
Yes.
All right, moving on to number 7, the approval of the Canton Water Agreement. And you can stay there, Joe and John.
Check it. I know we do have Jake Kennedy and.
He's coming up next,
Uh,
right after this one.
Do we think this is going to take a long time? I just, anyway,
Oh, I think so.
John's going to be here anyways, but,
I was going to bring Jay up before the liquor license approvals.
okay. All right,
Is that okay?
it's fine with me.
I do have a PowerPoint presentation I want to refer to as I make the initial introductory statements on this. Ms. Fagan's putting it up on the screen now, which I believe is available to home viewers.
And we have this someplace in our,
Hey, Maria, do you want me to drive?
You want this?
Sure, I can do it from here.
Can you do it from there?
I think so. I want to give it a shot.
You slide over here.
Okay, so what we're looking at And if you just follow my cursor, because I don't have a laser printer and they don't work very well for home viewing anyway, it's a map of our entire system. And when you get right down to it, there are 3 connections from the MWRA, 2 on Adams Street, which feed our low-pressure system, and we have 1 up in Metropolitan Avenue here, which feeds a higher pressure area. And a higher pressure area is pretty much designated, I'm going to drag, there we go, straight from Metropolitan Avenue, down across Wollaston Golf Course, up through the neighborhoods off of Randolph Avenue, up to our 2 tanks in Quincy, up in the reservation, but just over the Quincy line. We also have, heading to the west and south, our areas along the Canton border with a reservoir, a tank located on the side of Big Blue ski area, the Blue Hill. We also have, in that area, 1 isolated neighborhood down in the Holton's Pond area. It's comprised of Adrian, Silverbrook, Eileen, and Carisbrook, in a couple of houses along Hillside itself. To feed the tanks here and to feed the neighborhood with fresh water, and I'll get into detail why fresh water is emphasized, Milton since early 20th century had used Canton's water pipes, as I'm gesturing here, down Route 138 to what is Blue Hill River Road. And in Canton, Blue Hill River Road becomes Hillside Street in Milton. So we've used these pipes for that long. Since 1953, Milton and Canton had an agreement that allowed us, that protected us by using those pipes to feed our neighborhoods and feed our reservoirs. And what you have is redundancy in your balance and circulation, so we need to feed it from this way, and we also feed it coming across Wollaston Golf Course, these 2 areas. So they kind of backfeed each other, Wollaston and also down our Harland itself. So in 2008, 2007, allegation was raised that put the question in Canton's eyes that somehow Canton may have been enjoying the use of our water without the benefit of paying for it. It was an allegation raised by this community, and Canton was very angered by it, to say the least. And it resulted in a new agreement coming out in 2008, which established a timeline giving Canton until 2010 to make capital improvements in their community to become self-sufficient and get off of the use of our water. The reason why I say our water is, we have, I'm going to switch to the next slide. How do I do that? Can I just?
Next.
There we go. Is we have Green Street that comes down off of here. We have Route 138, including the ski area, their biggest consumer. They have Meditech along Hillside and a few houses along Hillside. But they had to physically disconnect, by the 2008 agreement, physically disconnect their system at this intersection, at Green Street at Green Lane, which is in this general area, and at the border on Route 138. And we fed, through our water supply, our MWRA supplied water, we fed those customers in Canton with our water through their pipes. They metered it, they reported the metering to us, and we issued bills to them. That was the case since 1953. In 1953, the agreement stated that it was the MDC, the former MWRA, the MDC wholesale rate plus 10%. In the 2008 agreement, we converted that payment to our Milton's retail rate. So take an aggregate of all of Canton's consumption on a quarterly basis and apply the highest tier of our water tiered system. And that's what we've been billing them, the retail rate. So Canton sets forth in motion by this agreement a plan, a capital plan to make improvements to their system and become self-sufficient. And in doing so, and this all was happening way prior to my coming here, in doing so, it was penny wise and pound foolish that nobody here locally said, well, that's all well and good, Canton becomes self-sufficient, they can provide their customers with water along this main, and we can give those customers back to them. Nobody thought about, what do you do now that you've got a long dead end with water quality issues in this neighborhood, what would become water quality issues? And by the way, if we need the tank at Big Blue and the 2 tanks on Chickatobit, how the heck do we feed them without the redundancy of this feed? That resulted in 2010 when they came, it was actually 2011, when Canton came forward to me and said, hey, we're ready to reconnect. And I said, whoa, time out. And I reported that to the selectmen at the time, that this was the concern. So the culmination of all of that discussion came down to, just as Canton needed a grace period to do things on their own accord, Milton needs to do things on its accord to come forward. And at the end of the day, having both done the things that they need to do, Canton can provide water to all of their customers through their pipes on their own, and we can provide water to only our customers through our pipes, which might include a new pipe to replace this series of pipes in Canton. So I say might, and I say that with some emphasis, because it's also the #1 component in our water capital study that's ongoing, our water system study. It's all hydraulic modeling and demand analysis. What do you really need? Can you survive without tanks at all?
Can I ask a question, though?
Sure.
You said that, for the most part, it's for redundancy, and we would still be feeding those tanks if we needed them, at least from one source for going across the Wallaston Golf Course?
Which eliminates redundancy.
Okay. Now explain, just for, I guess, everybody here, including me, why the need for redundancy? What would happen if we didn't have redundancy?
Well, most people think of, water in the kitchen faucet that comes through the pipe and comes out into the sink.
Yep.
Well, in a water system, the pipe's underground. Water flows this way sometimes, and it flows that way sometimes, depending on demand. So the direction of flow is very much a balanced thing in a closed system, in an underground pipe.
Okay.
So depending on where the demand pressures are seasonally, winter when Big Blue is making snow, winter when Big Blue is not making snow, summer when people are irrigating, and demand pressures are, and I mean pressures philosophically, I don't mean atmospheric pressures. When pressures are greater, your operating pressure drops in the system, and you rely on the tanks to be able to pressurize the system. So, the hydraulic model looks to conclude that question. And the question is, do we need the tanks? And if it's no, then the question becomes, well, then do we not need the loop? And if we don't need the loop, what are the impacts to supplying clean, reliable, and safe drinking water to the 40-some-odd households in this neighborhood? And that's simply what's called aged water, based on the length of pipe and the distance it travels and how much it turns around. When Houghton's Pond's in full operation in the summertime, they're irrigating the ball fields here. We're pretty confident, fresh water, because there's enough use. But in the wintertime, when there's no irrigation of the ball fields going on and Houghton's Pond is not open to the public, that becomes a vulnerability to those neighborhoods.
Now, how is that area going to get, if that loop is shut off going through Canton and back out, where does the water come from the other direction?
Wollaston, yep.
Right. So
The Wollaston direction.
So the study looks to analyze, it's a hydraulic model, looks to analyze and answer those questions. Do you need tanks? And if so, do I need the loop? And if I don't have the loop, what's the impact on aged water in those neighborhoods? And if the answer is, we can do all of those things by simply shutting the valves down and we don't need that triangular piece in Canton, then the first part of this agreement comes into effect that we've worked out. And every life goes on, we close a few valves and Canton connects 3 locations and
And we're not talking about much cost at all.
that's it,
Yeah.
and that's it. The truth is you're going to see that there's going to be some need to have that loop. And the structure of this looks to protect, and this is where it took so much time for Mr. Flynn and I and our counterparts over in Canton to hammer this thing out. The rest of this establishes a timetable, a timeline and milestones, if you will, where we have to do certain things by certain dates or the agreement terminates, because they didn't want us to drag our feet. So we framed it out in what we thought were achievable milestones, all the way to that if the question comes back, yes, you need the tanks, and yes, you need the pipe. It even establishes putting it on a capital plan, bringing it to town, getting the selectmen to support it, bringing it to a town meeting, having town meeting take an action on it, completion of construction bid documents, and then building it. And that's all strung out in section 13
Right.
of this agreement,
I mean, the fact of the matter,
15.
if we do need the tanks, and if we do have water quality issues in that Blue Hill River Road area, we're between a rock and a hard place. We really have no choice but to.
Create a loop.
And it's what we did to Canton in 2008.
Right, understand. And I guess my second question, did we not know that Canton was doing those infrastructure changes to its system to be able to, apparently it was a pressurization problem, that they didn't have enough pressure to feed those areas before?
It wasn't just pressure. I think they had well field capabilities, inability to provide without expanding well fields, and we've never seen the document proving it, but they claimed they spent between $3 and $4 million in capital to be able to serve these outlying parts of town.
So the question is we forced this agreement on them, and I was in the warrant committee when we did, and did we just sit back and do nothing after that, or did we not know that they were doing something? Did we not expect that they were going to do?
When I first brought this to light was that first year that I was here, so it was in
Right.
2010. Now, I came in 2009, so it was that following spring
Right.
when I found out about it,
Yeah.
and was able to work with my counterparts at Canton and say, whoa,
Put the
slow
brakes on a
down.
little
Yeah,
bit.
put the brakes on, which culminated in this past summer when it was late last spring when Canton had refused to pay their water bill, and they were really trying to bring our feet to the fire and scorch them a little bit. Did it become obvious that they were hell-bent on reestablishing this connection, and they weren't going to cooperate with us anymore?
Have they paid that bill?
They have not, but the provisions of this draft agreement that you have before you this evening speaks to that.
Yep.
Within 14 days of both communities fully executing this agreement, they will be paying that prior bill.
And I guess to that end, we can answer the citizen speak question. That money does in fact go into the water, into the water enterprise fund. It's just like any other water bill. So it's not like it's going to the general fund.
So Joe, what do we do in 2016? When
Well,
we
first
don't
major
have a loop?
benchmark is February 18th. We're going to know the answer to the question of the tanks and that supply triangle, whether we're going to need to have a pipe over there or not. If that's the case, we're going to be setting in motion pretty quickly actions before this board and from our own engineering department, a plan to get this thing ready for capital, to go to fall town meeting to get funded, with little choice, mind you.
So Joe, these dates are coming up now pretty quickly. We're almost into the new year. February 18th, we have to deliver the studies, and then by March 4th, this board has to vote on whether we need the Canton improvements. Are we confident that
Yes.
those dates are realistic?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess the second.
Not to the extent that I have liquidated damages with our consultant, but he knows that those are hard and fast. We're hoping to actually have that answer early next week in draft form, and then be able to formalize it by the 15th of February.
This is the best of a bad situation, really.
To that point, let's assume the worst-case scenario that we need all the tanks, and we.
Green Street piece?
Go ahead.
Sure. Well, assuming the worst-case scenario for Milton, that we absolutely need the 2 tanks, and there are water quality issues, and so we've got to run a lot more pipe, and I guess we've got to run pipe all the way up through the Blue Hills to feed the redundancy to the.
Correct. I mean, we looked at all feasible alternatives, short of running it, when you say through the Blue Hills, I mean, you mean literally through the Blue Hills.
Well,
To stay in Milton, we would have to go over the Blue Hills, which would be exorbitant, it would be cost infeasible.
right. Will Canton allow us to come through Canton to?
This agreement
It's in the
secures
agreement
that,
here. Yeah,
secures
okay.
that right.
What are we looking at, just even ballpark for?
3 million. For the pipe, and then depending on the answer on the tanks, it could be easily another 3 million on top of that.
Oh, if you have to replace those tanks?
If you have to replace the tanks, but the tanks are still serviceable as it is. The pipe feed is the only thing that's gonna be different than, I think the tanks should be a future consideration, as long as we're able to feed them with this new pipe.
Yeah, okay.
How much approximately, I mean, how old are the tanks, or
80
how much
years
life?
old.
80 years old?
80 years old, and they're riveted iron.
So they still have.
They need some
How
attention.
much-
They need, our hopes are that because of some improvements made at the Bellevue pump station on the MWA system, and the introduction of the Chippewa Reservoir at a higher hydraulic grade line, and the increase in hydraulic grade line that we got when the MWA put the new main down at Adams Street. We're hoping that those three things together improve our hydraulic capacity, where it may negate the need for one or hopefully all of those tanks. But you still need to have the loop to be able to provide the backbone.
Yeah.
But the tanks still have some number of years.
But if we didn't need the tanks, we're not going to have
Life
to run as
left
much
in them.
pipe, obviously.
I think we'd still run the same amount of pipe.
Really? Because
Yeah.
you still need the loop going through it and
Right.
back, even not to the tanks, and now it would just go back to the,
In fact, even
Back
more
to
so,
the-
you would need the pipe, because if the tanks come offline, you lose the ability to pressurize the system in the summertime. That's the balance you have to strike here.
so then those pipes, rather than running to the tank, would run to Wallaston Golf, basically reconnect that Wallaston Golf Course
It
area?
would basically begin near the border. It would probably actually begin at Brush Hill Avenue in Blue Hill Avenue, run down through Canton, run across from Canton along Blue Hill. The rest of Hillside, it would connect at where Holland comes up. That's up in this direction right here.
Yeah.
It would be that circuit of pipes that would be replaced under that scenario.
Now, those pipes that are in Milton, though, are those our pipes already?
Those are our pipes already, but they're very small, and it depends again on the question on aged water. If you can put a larger pipe in there that's clean, as opposed to 6-inch pipes that have less capacity in them, you may be able to get some better benefit from that. The study's going to flush all, no pun intended, going to flush all that out.
Talking about an accountant talking to an engineer, that's a bad combination. I barely understand what you're saying, but,
That's good. Stick to accounting.
Did you hear me say $6 million, $3 million and $3 million?
That I
That you heard.
All right.
What I do
So-
want to point out is one other part of this agreement is in good faith, when the Canton folks sat here back early fall, we had pledged to go out and to identify how many customers we might be able to put on to their system now without impacting our feed whatsoever. And we were able to, my counterparts in Canton and I and my staff were able to determine we could, by doing a couple of things in Green Street, return the Green Street customers back over to them without impacting this whole discussion we've just had.
so that is a plan.
So provision 4, paragraph 4 of the draft agreement basically gives them 14 days, allows them within 14 days to reconnect that portion of the system, which, trust me, if you saw the stack of trees that Mr. Flynn and I killed along with the people from Canton, we really tried to address every single aspect of this thing, and recognizing in the end that we're looking for the extra time, and we're looking to protect our system.
Joe, are they adamant, is Canton adamant about disconnecting us?
Yes.
Yeah?
Shouldn't say that. If we gave them free water, I think they would play with us. But
So right now, we're charging them retail plus 10%?
since the 2008 agreement, we've been charging them
Retail.
retail, period,
Okay.
which is what we charge all of our highest tier customers here in town.
Right.
They had been paying that right along until the last 3 payments of FY13, which they owe us for. The structure of this agreement, and this does deviate from earlier discussions we may have had, Canton always wanted to pay wholesale, the MWA wholesale rate, plus some percentage as an administrative fee.
Is it worth it to do that?
We were wrestling in on what the number was, and what it really boiled right down to is that, and try to keep this in simple terms, when the agreement ends, whenever it ends, we will have sold water to Canton up to that point. Yet, for the next 18 months, one full fiscal year and a half of the following fiscal year, we'll still be paying the MWRA, yet getting no revenue from Canton. And what that comes down to is what's called flow share, that our assessment's based on flow share. And rather than wrestling with hyperbole and abstract concepts of, well, how much water might you use in a given year and what might the assessment be, what we basically did is we restructured the compensation piece to be the current, or the then current, MWRA wholesale rate plus 6%, and 6% does cover our administrative burden.
Can I ask a question on that one? Because that was kind of a bizarre section. It's 6%, not to exceed $1,500 per quarter, which comes to $6,000 a year, but then limited to $5,000 a year. That's insane.
We,
Why couldn't they just limit it to $6,000 a year, or?
You didn't sit across the table like John and I did. We looked at the number and we felt that was even, we would never even get to the 5,000 limit. We didn't think we'd get there anyway. It wasn't worth fighting on, and it was one of the last sticking points on the agreement. So they needed a cap.
But why not make it $1,250 a quarter, so it comes out even?
I think on any individual quarter, when, like the high winter consumption of the high summer, you want to collect the full 1,500.
Okay.
Yet on those mediocre ones,
It'll
let it
come
fall
down below
Let
that.
it fall below, and I think we're okay.
Okay.
Rather
All right.
than establishing an artificial cap.
Gotcha.
That was the reason,
Okay.
what Joe just said.
I understand.
So to compensate for that, the language goes on to talk about how, when the contract terminates, that Canton will then continue to provide us with actual meter readings. We will then know the MWRA's actual wholesale assessment, and we will bill them for subsequent periods up until we've recouped all of that water we sold. So that's different than we had first talked to the board when we were here in the fall.
That was the change. Because of that, the agreement will not terminate until we get those final payments, because the early discussions kind of focused on the now. But to say it another way, the agreement doesn't end until we get all the money from the arrearage billing, if you will, for after the project is complete, for that 18-month period or whatever.
Yeah, but once it ends, we're in trouble. We need a plan.
Yes.
And we've already set our water rate for fiscal 14, correct?
That's correct.
So what is this going to do to that? Well, we kind of factored a little bit of it in.
I did not put the retail rate in, I put wholesale plus 10%, which is what their original offer was. So
Okay.
when
So
I
we're-
build revenue streams, I think we're
We're-
covered.
Yeah, so we got
Yes.
maybe a little 4%, a small shortfall perhaps, but nothing enormous. And that they will pay, again, the fiscal 13, they will pay that in full at the retail rate?
That is correct.
Yes.
It-
Go ahead.
You were probably going to say the same thing. We've already issued one bill, and we're about to issue a second bill in FY '14, based on the old agreement, which is retail rate. We're going to have, under
Have to
this
abate
agreement,
some
we
of
do have to go back, not abate so much as go back and recalculate it
Okay.
and reissue the bill.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess to a degree, this 10%, 6% thing, if we get the FY13 money paid in full, I mean, that's already ancient history, so that's money that can be used if need be to,
It's very complicated, but when you factor in the flow share, and if you looked at their average 5 high consumption years and speculated where the MWRA assessment historically has gone, it was becoming something that was going to be a deal breaker. It was becoming wholesale plus 60%. It was a killer. So by putting in and getting them to understand the concept that they have used the water and they haven't paid for it yet, and that we haven't paid for it yet either, that was a major breakthrough, and that they agreed to, pay for it at the MWRA assessment rate, at that time, which put it back, pulled it back into alignment.
okay, yeah, I guess I didn't actually key in on the difference between wholesale and assessed rate, but those are different numbers.
Yes.
Okay.
Very much so.
One thing you should be aware of is the earlier negotiations, in the earlier negotiations, we, Anne Marie, Joe, and I, were looking for a higher administrative fee. But the reason we're talking lower figures now is they, at least the lawyer and the Joe's counterpart in Canton, agreed that Canton would continue to maintain those pipes, even though our water's going through it. That was not the case when we started. So it made sense now that eliminated a major cost for Milton.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it was a point Joe made rather forcefully in the proceedings. He looked at his counterpart and said, "You don't want us maintaining and repairing your pipe, do you?" And he said, "No." Taking that cost out at least assisted the calculations in what was a fair administrative fee.
Mhm.
Because prior to that, it was really a big ticket item.
Yeah, I understand. Okay.
We have a proposed motion, if somebody wants to make it.
I'll move that we approve the agreement between the town of Milton and the town of Canton relative to water supply as written.
I'll second.
Motion was made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, could I just, I'm glad to mention, originally before the snowstorm, both boards were going to consider this on the same night. The Canton Board is considering it next Tuesday, January 7th, so we'll let you know.
Okay.
We will report to them that you have approved it, so,
Did their people get any feedback on, in terms of what the board,
no,
we have no clue as to what?
no clue. If, in
It seems
such-
fair, certainly, but
then a procedural question, if, given the timing here, with your meeting on the 7th on the 21st, and Canton Selectmen meet on the 7th, if they approve this agreement as written, could you also vote to authorize the board to sign the agreement independent of a meeting in order, because otherwise, that would avoid a 2-week delay, if you will?
sure.
Could we sign it on the 11th? Since we aren't meeting on the 11th. Is that a problem a few days later? Because it's not a 2-week, then we have a meeting on the
Oh, your
11th.
meeting's also on
It's
the
a
11th?
Saturday, it's a goals and objectives, but we could probably.
Yes, that'll work, yeah, sure.
Right.
I thought it was the 7th, that's fine, yes, thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your work on this. It's a lot of work.
There you go.
That was a lot of work.
It is. Nothing's easy in my realm. Snowstorms are easy.
I should, Mr. Chairman, I should mention that Anne Marie and Joe are outstanding in this, and Joe, as you can tell from this discussion, the technical issues are monumental, and I think you would be proud if you had sat in on the negotiations, and both his technical expertise and his manner of dealing with his counterpart was very admirable. I think he
Well, we are aware of
served the
it.
board well in the town very well throughout this. It's not an easy topic by any
No,
means.
that's, I can well appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Appreciate that.
Okay, next on the agenda, we're going to move up number 11, which is the approval of the 502 Granite Avenue signage request. I'll bring that forward. I'd like to invite Jay Kennedy to the table, and
Peter Lyons. I'm with the Dartmouth Company in Boston.
You represent the
Represent the
Sleepers?
tenant.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Sorry.
yeah, and Bill Clark, our town planner, please, if you want to come up as well. I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Peter Lyons.
Peter Lyons, okay.
Yep.
So the last time you were here, Jay, we talked about your LED sign on the roof, and also a new proposed sign on the westerly part of your building that faces the highway. Since then, unfortunately, we weren't given the information from the 2008 meeting and the 2011 meeting, which amended, the 2011 amended your 2008 approvals. And the board just had some questions and concerns for you tonight with your proposal going forward. Tom, I know you had some concerns with if
Well-
you want to present them.
Well, first of all, the 2008 agreement, and just so everybody understands, indicated that it recognized the hardship, the special location of the property, but said only one sign on that building. The 2011, when we allowed you to move it to the roof, continued the 2008, saying only one sign on the building. when we were in the other night, I don't think anybody realized, in terms of the selectmen, that that was the case. So we went forward talking about the two signs. I'm not sure, I don't think we want to go back on what we said necessarily. But I mean, I think we all have concerns about the LED sign. I mean, nobody really likes the LED sign, you know, from a standpoint of aesthetics. You know, we prefer it not be there. As you go down Granite Ave, and I think I threw this one out, you'll notice even though those signs don't qualify under our sign bylaw, there are a bunch of freestanding signs. I think, well, Dunkin' Donuts has one, the bank has one, the funeral home has one. So I just raised the question, would a freestanding sign that was of similar size to the Dunkin' Donuts or the Citizen Bank sign be sufficient for your needs?
We went through that years ago. There's no place to put it. The building's too close to the street.
Mm.
Are you saying a freestanding sign, Tom, instead of the LED?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, that would be, I think that would be a huge compromise if but you're saying there just is no place to put it there?
Absolutely not. It's just, we got like 2 feet of landscaping and then the curb, and then the sidewalk, then the curb.
Okay. Bill, is that, I mean, you know that property better than I do, but.
There you go. Yeah, look at the last picture.
We actually had some discussions on that years ago, and
So, Mr. Chairman, if I might just add, so I think at the last meeting, we were in a little bit of a procedural oddity, because the request kind of came in, that initially, Jay, you were looking to bypass the sign review committee and come in directly to us, and I think that's what initially got put on the agenda for that night, was your request to bypass the sign review committee. However, you did go to the sign review committee the night before, and they took this under advisement. Bill was able to report to us on that. So what happened was, we didn't have in front of us at the time, because this was initially put on the agenda, I think, more for looking to bypass the review. We didn't have the 2008 or the 2011 or the completed application, and all of the paperwork we now have, we had your attachments, you know, we had your 5-page, well, I guess it's really Sleepy's 5-page projection of what you're looking to do on the building, but we now have gone back and looked at the 2008 and the 2011 language, just to make sure that we had everything in front of us. And since that time, Bill Clark has had some further discussions, I think probably with you, and maybe with both of you, actually. Maybe Bill could update the board, Mr. Chairman, on what the conversations he's had with both parties are, and what your modified proposal is.
From the last meeting, one of the questions was, could we take and make the LED sign just say Sleepy's, take off the Mattress Professionals, take off the white background, put it on a black background. I did discuss it with Peter. He sent it to the sign company, and they came back and gave you an image of what it would look like, saying Sleepy's on the roof in a black background.
Yeah, and as a fixed sign, it looks a lot better than.
Yep. We did have a discussion about the backlit sign, and again, as Jay just said, there isn't any real property in front of the building to take and place it. You'd be putting it in the sidewalk or in the street in order to get it to,
Yeah.
to do what you really want it to do.
Okay.
The rest of it, Peter did come back and give you the updated images that you requested. I did send I took a shot, Katie took a shot at it, made some changes to it and redlined it, sent it back. We came back, and I do believe that what you have before you takes into account the May 2008 vote, the November 2011 vote, and what the new requirements would be, what your new decision would be.
I think with the black background it's really gonna,
It looks a lot
it's
better.
really gonna dim that sign down a lot.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
does.
it's probably not even gonna look that much like a digital sign. It's gonna look more like a backlit sign with the black background.
It's a black sign on a black roof.
Yep. So it just kind of
Enough
blends.
time to change it.
You just see the red.
You're just gonna see red. And the other part to that is, written into your decision is that it will just say Sleepy's. It's not going to change.
Right.
It will dim down at night, just the way it did before. I don't have the exact hours, they're in the decision, that it tones itself down by a percentage so that it's not the same blaze that it is during the day. It gets dimmed down a little bit at night.
You can do that
It's programmed for that.
program?
Now, I do have one question, because in this agreement, and let me throw it out there, we have the lights going off on the westbound
The facade sign.
facade sign at 11,
Right.
and the dimming going off at midnight. Could we have them both going off at 11? Would that be an issue? Or just to make them the same time, at least?
Yeah, I think the dimming was in the original 2008 order on the
Was
LED
midnight,
sign.
yeah.
It was midnight to 5 a.m.
Can, you represent Sleepy's?
Correct.
You do, okay. Jay, was there any, because we were the ones that actually brought up about the wash-down lighting. You didn't bring it up. You didn't even know if Sleepy's wanted it.
Well,
Do they
Peter,
want
he did ask, had asked for that, but I mean, he didn't ask for that until after I left the meeting. And the first meeting, okay, that we didn't discuss it. In the second meeting, I think we did discuss it. And after I left the first meeting, I called him up and he says, well, are they gonna let us light the front of the building? And I said, I don't think they're going to. And then you graciously said that would be a good idea at the
I
second
think it was
meeting.
Tom. I'm what he said.
Yeah, tell me about this.
So, but it was a concern of theirs, and I didn't realize it at the time.
Okay. But the fact is, and I think the board will agree that we do have an LED sign up there. It was approved, it's there as of right, and you don't have to take it down. I'm not even sure if we can make you take it down. But I do agree with the board in stating that, you know, if it was a fixed, no light bulb changes every 15 seconds.
Well, it's not gonna change now.
Not at all. Like, I mean, that's,
It's gonna be
I think
black.
that's 100% better, I think.
Yeah.
It's an improvement
Even-
over the current situation where we have
It's-
4 flashing signs in different colors, because obviously you're trying to sell the building, so you've got different messages up there, but this would be, I think, an improvement over it.
So this is basically just one sign, because the black is going to blend into the roof.
Right.
You're just going to see the Sleepies in red, and it's not going to flash, and it's
And
not
the-
going to change color.
Yeah, and the initial proposal was to have a white background on it, which Bill, you know, I think to his credit, thought a black background would look better, would blend in better with the roof, and had some discussions with you on that, and that's agreeable to Sleepy's?
Yes, it is.
The other request of the sign review committee was a 10% reduction in the size of the westbound facing sign.
Yes.
And was that discussed at all?
I'm gonna punt that one back to Peter.
The discussion I had on the westbound facing signage was you wanted to make this Mattress Professionals language
The same size?
same size as the Sleepy's logo. The concern on Sleepy's end was that it would not be able to be read if it were that small. The Mattress Professionals language is part of their corporate entity. It's their brand.
I understand. Although there are many, many places that they don't use it.
And the reason for that being is, you know, it's funny, you probably noticed there's a Sleepy's basically in every corner. There's 3 in Dedham. A lot of their current stores are acquisitions from whether it's 1-800-Mattress, Mattress Giant, those type of establishments that may not necessarily had the same attention from Sleepy's during lease negotiations or prior to get the signage that they wanted. South Bay has Mattress Professionals, Boylston Street has Mattress Professionals. Any of the newer corporately signed deals with Sleepy's has that in some type of capacity within their signage. And that's kind of the goal here in their proposal in the package in front of you.
Now, do they have it in the Quincy, in the North Quincy location, do you know?
They do. I'm uncertain if it's on the pylon or on the store. I can,
It's not on the pylon, so.
Okay, then it must be on the store because that is a newer location for them.
Okay.
I think the question that Mr. Hurley actually asked was, when this went to the sign review committee, for as much as we have the two S's moving out to the soffit, it was to shrink the whole thing by 10%, not just, it were two parts to the equation. One was to take the Mattress Professional and squeeze it underneath Sleepy's, but it was to take Sleepy's and shrink it to that 90% of what's up there.
Prior to today, I was unaware of that. I haven't had those discussions, I guess, with anyone from the town or Sleepy's.
So Bill, you're saying reduce both lines by 10%?
That was
by
their,
10%.
yes.
Yes,
Was the sign review committee's
The
request?
sign review committee's request was a 90% reduction in what says Sleepy's, and then take the black line, the Mattress Professionals, and make
Fit
it
it under
fit
one line.
between the S's.
So 10%, yeah, make it 90% of its
So
size.
you wouldn't be able to
10%.
read it at all. You wouldn't, I mean,
It would be much smaller.
you wouldn't be able to read it at all. Yeah, I think you're barely gonna be able to read it. You're only talking about a 9-inch letter anyhow. But if you drop that, cringe that in, you'd have to use much smaller letters. Your letters would probably get down to 5 inches.
I think you're bigger than that, but
Is that part of the deal, is to have the Mattress Professionals there?
Yeah, that's, like he said, all their new acquisition stores, they want it, that's their logo, and that's what they want, you know, if.
Is the one in
they
Quincy?
Negotiate when they're negotiating leases, so.
Right.
instead of it being 19 feet, it would be, it'll be 17. It'd be 17 feet
Right.
instead of
Right.
19 feet.
The one that we just referenced in Quincy,
Mm-hmm.
that actually does not have the Mattress Professionals on the building.
Doesn't have it on the building.
No.
Have it?
No, I drove by it. It
Oh,
just-
okay, doesn't, okay,
Yeah.
just as Sleepy's?
Just as Sleepy's, yeah. And that's a new,
That's a newer look. So that's of knowledge to myself
Yeah.
that I can kind of understand why, because I was I was in Hicksville, New York with the CEO of Sleepy's, and that was, the explanation he had given me. And for that being a newer store, I think that's news to me.
Right.
And the capacity you are here is their real estate broker, is that
Correct.
right? Okay. Oh, but, so you're saying that this request really wasn't before them about shrinking the size of Sleepy's, the Mattress Professionals? You only talked with them about this fitting the second line directly below the first line, but
Correct.
reducing the whole size of the two lines together has been put before Sleepy's.
That has not.
And Bill, you're saying it would go from, what, 19 feet to 17 feet?
Taking off 10% would be taking off just under 2 feet. You get 288, take away 24, you'd be down to 17 and change.
Right, which would reduce the sign on the front, on the west
Instead of
facade.
being 18, 10, it'd be 17 feet. That's just on the facade.
Do we have any,
The problem is when you shrink it down, then you've got to shrink down the letters too.
That would allow you to make it actually go higher.
say that again? You're bringing the Mattress Professionals in, right?
Yeah.
I suggested
By
taking
10%.
it in. They're saying that they need it to go out. I'm saying if you shrink it 10%, you could actually push it up on the building itself.
Move the wording up higher,
Yep.
Yeah. Not much higher, but because you're only talking 2 feet.
but a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Would they be amenable to that?
That's something I'd have to present to them. I wouldn't be able to speak on that this evening.
Right.
And of course, they'd have to do something similar to what's in front of you to kind of get a feel of what, what it would look like. This is all done by them.
Mhm.
Where are you at, Jay, in your lease negotiations?
Well, that's, if they can get this, they're gonna sign the lease. That's where, it's, that's where I'm at.
But they're content with what you have proposed on the roof?
Yeah,
Yes.
this is, you know, I actually set the sign up with white and took pictures of it. I sent them to Bill and with the black, and it looks better with the black. And it looked pinkish with a white background. And we actually sent that to Sleepy's. We set the sign up, we did a test, and we sent it to them both ways, and they didn't, you know, they didn't like it with the white either.
What would you, you mentioned 10% reduction, right?
Yeah.
In everything, and move it up.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that?
Yeah. I mean, 10% is not that much. Like,
Well,
Might actually make it stand out a little bit better, because if it's a little bit higher up, it doesn't blend in with the window as much.
it's probably just gonna kick us back another month. I mean, the way these people work with their leases, it's gonna be 3 or 4 months before they move in there from the time they actually sign the lease. And I'm out another month if we have to go back and approve, you know, get another approval to sink the sign by 10%.
what's the
and
width of
what's-
this sign right now, Sleepy's? What's the width of it, do you know?
18, Sleepy's is 18 feet, 10 inches,
Oh, it is? I
11
didn't see that
inches,
there.
basically. The Mattress Professional is 24 feet.
Okay.
I think it looks pretty good.
Well, we do have a meeting scheduled for the 7th. We've got a holiday in between, but I would think this would be something that you could go back to them pretty quickly on, and we could, one thing that we have is we want to make a pretty detailed motion with all of these different requirements that we're putting into it, and that's what was done in 2008. It's a 2 or 3 page series of findings and a determination, because our bylaw does require that we make certain findings before we give some kind of a variation on what's in the zoning bylaw for signs. Jay, I just want to go back to the LED sign. I talked with one of the selectmen who was on the board back in 2008, who said that, and you can probably add some background to this, the LED sign was initially on the west facade of the building.
Right.
The selectman who I spoke with said that at the time, the selectman wanted and suggested putting the sign on the LED sign on the roof so that it would face the traffic rather than facing across the highway and onto the residential area across the street, across the highway. But that your preference at the time was to put it on the front of the building, and then eventually, a couple of years later, it was moved to the roof. Can you maybe shed any light on that?
I don't remember that at all.
Okay, at least that was the theory that, I mean, I know we've had some comments and some opposition to the LED sign, and as you said, Tom, for aesthetical purposes, there might be another variation, a pole sign. I think that's what the terminology was, Bill, for that the other stores, Dunkin' Donuts and the others have, or a sign that's on a
Backlit
pole.
sign.
A what sign?
Backlit sign.
Backlit sign. That might be preferable, but this sign has been on the building for 5 years. It's been on the roof for, I guess, 2.5. And I do think this is an improvement over what the current sign is, because it has the dark background and has just the red lettering. And it faces the highway. The board in 2008 made a lot of findings that this building is not in the East Milton Square Business District, that it's unique because it's adjacent to the highway, but it's also between the on and off ramps, and it's not, they differentiated it from other businesses in buildings in the area. There's also not residential buildings on either side, or even retail buildings. It's all office buildings. So I think the board's findings from 2008 were pretty detailed as to why this is a unique location, and why the LED sign for this building was acceptable, and why they made the determinations. I'll just read for the record. It says that, this is in the zoning bylaws, it says the board, in order to approve a sign that's not otherwise allowed, it says the Board of Selectmen shall determine that A, the applicant has a reasonable need for the sign, B, there's a reasonable basis for exempting the sign from the applicable standards, and C, that the exemption of the sign from such standards will not have a substantial detrimental effect on the community. So the board did make those 3 findings back in 2008 and set out some pretty detailed reasons as to why.
Right, and in terms of those reasons, the fact that the tenant, or the occupant of the building is changing, I don't think changes the uniqueness of the building or the other factors that they, so I can.
No, and I do think it's an improvement. I guess the question is for the front facade. We thought maybe that we'd be able to go with Bill's initial suggestion of putting the mattress professionals completely under the word sleepies, but maybe a better solution would be to try to do the shrinkage by a couple of feet and see how that would look.
Well, even with the way it is now, you still only have a 9-inch letter on the mattress professionals. And if you shrink it in a couple of feet, I mean, first of all, if you put it underneath sleepies, you won't be able to read it at all. You wouldn't even, you know, because you'd have to make a much smaller letter. But even if you cut the sleepies down 10%, and then you bring down, you know, you have to line that up underneath it again. Well, I guess you'd go up higher I mean, but to cut the 9-inch letter down is, you know, you're gonna lose, a 9-inch letter, you'll be able to read it as it is. You know, so thinking you're gonna cut that down, you know, to 8 inches or whatever, you're just gonna lose it. I mean, I don't think that that's over the top or offensive or anything. I think it looks really nice. And people are going by at, you know, pretty fast speeds. So.
Well, I think the issue all along was the LED sign, and I think you've addressed that. Personally, I don't.
I think the 10% thing is splitting hairs at this point, with all due respect, you know. I mean, it's, these guys lay this stuff out professionally, you know, and it has to be read. And,
I know, but we have to read the emails.
yeah. And what
I
kind of
guess,
emails
we do have a sign review committee. They did come up with the recommendation, and I think we at least have to address why, I mean, somebody really has to come back to us, I think, in terms of the tenant, saying that that would be a hardship somehow or other. And that's just my personal opinion.
Well, the sign review committee also talked about taking the LED sign down and having only one sign. And I
Yes.
think what we talked about the last time was that the LED sign really only faces traffic that's coming north on 93. It's not any help identifying that building to anyone coming south on 93, which is really the reason for this request on the west facade.
Right. Right.
Wasn't the initial,
The rear view is here. Two can only see it here. Can't see it coming this way.
that's the southbound traffic?
Yeah.
And I know signage is important to any retailer, but to this tenant specifically, as it, you know, they view a mattress purchase as a calculated, you know, thought-out process. So it's not, you know, it's not something
Not
you
an
buy.
impulse buy.
Yeah, it's not an impulse buy, so people see it and they have to resonate and they have to know where it is, basically. And there's no anchor tenant, say a daily traffic draw. It's a little away from the retail, so signage to them in this particular case is very important and would, you know, make the deal go one way or the other, to be honest.
And
Well-
that's the big thing with this type of tenant. It's like, there's no synergy there, you know? So, I mean, the reason they like the location at all is because of the exposure. And, you know, they're looking for exposure. You know, it's-
When are you expecting to sign a lease?
You know, as soon as this is wrapped up, we'd hope to have a lease signed within the next, you know, 30 to 45 days.
Okay.
And they're going to take possession upon lease execution.
Right.
How, if we did ask you to go back and at least come back to us with a reason why the sign could not be reduced by 10%, could you get back to us by our January 7th meeting?
Yeah, I could get back to you by then.
And have your design guy just produce a new sign like, you know, with the 10% less and moved up,
Do you have a recommendation?
just so we can look at it.
Yeah.
Just gave it to him.
You what?
I think that, I
You
think
have
the
that,
board
Bill?
is saying, I understand what you're saying. And I'll discuss it with Peter and get it to him.
I think you're there, you're almost there.
Yeah.
If if we can negotiate the 10% reduction on the westerly side, I think the board seems to be on board with the LED sign and, the new colors.
I think the board's on board with having both signs, having Sleepy's the Mattress Professional on the west facade. They're going with the issue or with the recommendation of the sign review committee to shrink it by 10%.
But what is the basis of shrinking it by 10%? I
It
mean, as
doesn't
far as
meet the
I'm
it doesn't
concerned,
meet the calculations that are in the design guidelines.
well, but that's why I initially wanted to skip over that anyhow, because nothing on this building as far as signage meets the guidelines of the sign committee. And to be perfectly frank with you, it's just,
But that's why they have a design review committee, to look at the signs, to try to make the signs uniform.
oh,
And you went through that process, so you did go before them, and then you came here to us, and we had a discussion about it.
well,
To give them credit, they actually came back and said, look, we prefer to, we say, take the LED sign down and shrink the existing one, put it up in the gable end, and shrink it by 10%. The members said, take and shrink the Mattress Professional so it fits underneath Sleepy's, so it's a uniform sign as you drive by. They didn't have a problem with the red, they didn't have a problem with the gold star, and they didn't have a problem with the black letters. There was a discussion about the sign being lit, and at the meeting it was adamant, no, there won't be any lights. The next night when we came here, well, now it's being lit. It was part of the discussion that we knew it was going to be lit at some point in the future. So having it lit is fine. It just becomes another issue for this table.
Right, but it's not an interior lit sign. It's just
Which is the
splash.
soffit light.
Yeah, it's just a splash.
It will just be lights coming out of the soffit that come down, wash the face of the building. So again, the
Will
whole
those
face of
lights
the
be,
building.
those lights won't shine
They
out
don't
at all?
shine out, they shine on
Just
the
down.
building coming down.
Yep.
They probably won't even shine on the letters, right?
It's gonna light up the whole face of the building, not the letters. But because the letters stand out against that color, you'll see it. Jay's probably right. You drive by at night, you won't see the Mattress Professional, but you sure as heck will see Sleepy's.
Well, at night, you're
See
probably not
the-
going to see a black sign regardless how big it is, would you?
At night, no. But during the day, you'll see the Mattress Professional. So if I'm sitting there in the morning, I'm gonna see the Mattress Professional. At no other time am I gonna see that.
Well,
Yeah, I
so-
think the reason for the 10% reduction is, it's not really this board, but it's the amount of emails we got about the sign from,
about which sign?
about your sign from the locals, from the people who live over
About the
there.
digital sign.
Yeah, most of them are the digital.
Mostly the
sign.
digital, yeah. But
Yeah, I have to say, I haven't had that many emails.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe
well, I've had
they're-
a good
maybe
few, yeah.
They're not emailing us all at the same time, but I think the discussion about the west front facade at the last meeting was more about whether we could fit the Mattress Professionals completely under the word Sleepy's. And Bill, you had some follow-up discussions. We thought that might happen, but that's not possible from what we're told. So we didn't really talk as much about reducing it by 10%, but that was something that our sign review committee, which is a committee appointed by this board, and what they're recommending, and I think what we're doing is asking, if you have 30 to 45 more days before you're expecting to really execute this lease, then why don't we go back and explore that and see if there's a logistical problem? I think, Dennis, you made the comment at the last meeting that given the way the roof line is on this building, and I agreed with you, I don't have as much of a problem with the lettering extending out a little bit under the word Sleepy's. But I do think probably for our sign review committees, given that they've considered and suggested making it smaller by 10%, we should explore that. And we may not have done that, I guess, in the fall.
It also came from the building commissioner and the sign review committee, because it doesn't meet the guidelines themselves.
Now, would it meet the guidelines for the 10% reduction?
No,
Or still would?
It still doesn't make it.
it's
but-
not even close.
Just to follow up on a point you made about the 30 to 45 days, the way Sleepy's works corporately, the lease negotiations won't start until they have a signed package approved by the town. So we're talking 30, 45 days from when we're done here. So that might be January 7th, so that's when that clock would start again. It's just,
You must have some of the material terms of this lease already agreed
we have
to.
an executed LOI, letter of intent. The legal terms have yet to be discussed formally, and those will start as soon as we have the proper signage in place.
Okay. As Dennis said, I think if we can come to an agreement on a 10% reduction, I think on January 7th, we can't speak for the whole board, obviously, but I think we'd be there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that way we'd be able to
Well,
tailor
basically,
our order, or like decision or evidence. We have a pretty detailed draft that you've seen, but we'd have to incorporate any additional changes into it.
so you want to see the layout of what it would look like, reduced 10%, basically.
Actually, if Sleepy's wants to do another layout, that's fine. I think we just want to at least, it was a recommendation of the sign review committee. We'd like to live by that recommendation if we
Those guys are
could.
still mad at me for getting the digital sign, and they're trying
I
to
know
prove
that.
they're in charge. That's all it is to me. It was a definite,
I don't know
ego
that we
thing from the
even
minute
need
I
to
walked
bother
into
you
the
to come
room.
back in. I think if you
When
could
was this?
report to Bill could come in and,
I said, this don't matter, I got
there
the
is an
digital
agreement on that.
sign.
You can
The one guy who always wears the hat, I don't know his name, but he's just mad at me.
Jay, I was saying, I don't think we'd even need to bother you to come in a third time. I think if that is agreeable to Sleepy's, and Bill can have some communications with you after the meeting, then.
We have everything else we
then
need, yeah.
Really, Bill just
Well-
can come in and report that, and he can give you a draft of what the order we'd write up would be.
I guess we gotta look, see what it's gonna look like and what the visibility of it's gonna be if you shrink it 10%.
They'll do the exact same thing that they did here to
Right,
to get
and
us
whether or
to-
not it's acceptable to them.
I think if you can pull that off, you probably have a deal here at this board. I mean, it's a real estate deal. There's always concessions to be made. I got to make them every day. Most of them I don't like, but you have to make them.
Correct.
So,
Just the signage is very sensitive to them for this particular location, having, the North Quincy location, 2 miles away, Braintree. So it's a complete signage play with the hopes that they'll sell a lot of mattresses as well.
But clearly, it's, in terms of access from the highway, it's more convenient than any other
Yes.
location you could have.
Yes, it is.
So,
and as I said in the last meeting, Jay, it's important to us that we get that building rented. We don't want a vacant building over there.
You don't.
No, I know.
We don't want,
You're not making a huge tax payment. Never mind the mortgage
we don't
payment.
want the building vacant, but we also want to consider the aesthetics of the
But we want to
area,
consider
and what the
the
sign
aesthetics,
review
exactly.
committee
I
is
think
recommending.
it looks really good the way it is, but we'll lay it out the other way and see how
Change
it
it
looks.
10% and come back. And I
we're
believe,
looking at 1 week. We'll meet next.
as Katie said, you probably won't even have to come in here the next time,
I just love coming here.
I'll bet you do, yeah.
And just so
I learned so much.
I'm clear when I speak to my tenant that the mattress professionals doesn't have to be.
No, I don't think we're required.
Okay.
If we can
Just
just get
wanna-
the
just wanna
10%
clarify.
reduction, yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you very
Jay.
much.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
You too.
What time have we? 9:06. Okay. Next up is number 8 on the agenda. It's the liquor license approvals, liquor license renewals. And we have a bunch of them.
Okay.
You want me to do this one?
Sure, if you
You
want.
got to do it the last meeting.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, I'll move that we approve the following 2014 liquor license renewals, contingent upon the receipt of all necessary certificates required by Chapter 304, Acts of 2004, signed by the building inspector and the fire department. Milton American Legion Post 114 at 123 Granite Avenue, Wollaston Golf Club, 999 Randolph Avenue, NPP Inc., doing business as Central Liquor Mart, 26 Central Avenue, Delaney Liquors, doing business as East Milton Wine and Spirits, 368 Granite Avenue, Esprit de Vin, 25 Central Avenue, Fruit Center Inc., 110 Antwerp Street, the Milton Huzik Club, 193 Central Avenue, Wharf Street Restaurant Group LLC, DBA 88 Wharf Street, Milton Fuller Housing Corporation, DBA Fuller Village, 1372 Brush Hill Road, Milton Fuller Housing Corporation, DBA Fuller Village, 1399 Blue Hill Avenue, Welch Restaurant Management LLC, DBA Abbey Park, 550 Adams Street, B&D Ichiro Inc., DBA Ichiro Sushi, 538A Adams Street, Milton's Opus LLC, DBA Steel and Rye, 95 Elliott Street. And to approve annual Sunday opening permits for Central Liquor Mart, East Milton Wine and Spirits, and the Fruit Center, and permission for Esprit de Vin to sell alcoholic beverages on Sundays between Thanksgiving and New Year's.
I will second.
Motion was made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Number 9, the approval of the 2014 entertainment licenses.
Move to approve the following 2014 entertainment license renewals: Abbey Park, 550 Adams Street, 88 Wharf Street, Marketplace Cafe, 110 Antwerp Street, and Steel and Rye, 95 Elliott Street.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Number 10, the approval of the extension of New Year's Eve serving hours for Abbey Park, Steel and Rye, and I believe 88 Wharf.
I'll move to approve a request from Abbey Park, Steel and Rye, and 88 Wharf to extend their hours to serve alcohol on New Year's Eve to include a toast at midnight.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any comment?
I assume a toast means just a champagne toast and no other alcohol? Is that what it's meant to mean?
It's meant to mean that.
It can be they can serve anything they want. It's just one toast, right? Okay. So it's one drink at midnight, basically. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. We have done number 11. Number 12, the approval of one-day liquor license for the Fruit Center.
I'll move to approve a request for a one-day liquor license from the Milton Fruit Center for a beer and wine seminar that will be held on January 31st, 2014 at 10 Bassett Street.
Second.
The motion was made and seconded. Any comment? Did you say beer and wine, Tom?
No. Approve a liquor license for a beer
Or a
seminar.
beer seminar? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Approval, Senior Project Road Race.
I'll move that we approve the use of the town streets and ways for a Run for Red Nation road race that will take place on Sunday, April 13th, 2014, with proceeds to benefit the high school's sports, clubs, and activities, contingent upon approval by the police chief.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
And this is, we should know, this is a high school project for a student whose
Yes, I saw that. That was
name
nice.
is, let me just, Brendan Hunt, who's doing this for a school project at the high school, and sounds from his letter like he's done a lot of work organizing this and planning it. So
Yeah.
congratulations to Brendan, and hopefully his school project will go well.
Well done. Number 14, the Mass Municipal Association Annual Business Meeting. Look forward to this.
we need a
And
motion
do
for
we
this?
have a motion for this?
No, only if,
Just
Mr.
a
Chairman, only
discussion?
if you were not going to be attending.
I'm going to be there,
So
yeah.
if you're going to be attending, there's no
Then-
vote necessary.
Okay.
Yeah, so it would just be you voting in the business meeting.
And that's January 20,
Fifth,
January 25th.
25th.
And we're all attending it, I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
And number 15 is a discussion on the 2014 annual town meeting articles. Do we have,
Mr. Chairman, the
Yes.
date is fast approaching for articles for the 2014 annual town meeting warrant. Deadline to submit an article is January 8th. So I just wanted to take this time to make sure that, it's my understanding at this time we have one new article that you would like to have on the 2014 annual town meeting warrant, and that is the feasibility study for the DPW yard to include the park, cemetery, and consolidated facilities. And I just wanted to make sure at this time that there are no other articles, new articles. We have our boilerplate, but no other new articles that you, the board, are looking to.
when
Is
is our
that coming from
deadline?
the capital committee?
It's a good question. I think it's coming from the selectmen, but, I mean, it was a,
That's a good question, Katie.
it was part of the DPW's request of the capital committee was to approve funding of the study. We don't really see it on the capital committee as a capital issue. I mean, it's not a fixed asset, if you will. You know, it's
Oh, all right, so this is just a study to,
just a study, yeah.
wait, I thought there was a need for funding.
Well, you
maybe
did-
over and above what's already been funded for the cemetery or the DPW buildings, but maybe I guess I'm wrong.
That would,
That's a
if
separate
that happens,
issue.
that would come as a request out of the capital committee. But, so this is just a study of, it's kind of like a master plan of what a DPW facility in the town of Milton should be.
Oh, all right, okay.
And Joe can kind of fill in the gaps in it, but, and then on the capital committee, we said, well, why not wrap in cemetery and parks into that in terms of looking at a master plan?
Okay.
And consolidated facilities, it's my
Yes, and
understanding?
yeah. So
So that-
it's kind of a
that's different than-
placeholder
yeah.
at this point, but, and there was a price tag of about $35,000 put on it by DPW, what the cost of that study might be.
When is the deadline, Anne Marie?
January 8th,
Which is a day after our next meeting? I thought.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought the deadline was coming up before the next meeting, so technically we could submit something else at
You
the
could
next
submit
meeting.
something else
then.
if you.
All right. The only other one that we talked about recently was the Affordable Housing Trust. Somebody had done a draft of a charge for that, but it's not really a committee, it's a trust. And there's a lot of, the statute sets forth a lot of what the duties of that trust, the trustees are. So, but we did look at a couple, at least I looked at a couple of other towns and trying to look at the committee charge. And some towns do have bylaws, so there was a possibility we could have submitted an article for that, although I think we'd need a little more time right now to give that a little more thought.
Right.
Be the fall town meeting.
Could be, yeah, maybe we should target that.
Do we need town meeting approval for any of that, or?
I think only if we wanted to add a bylaw for it.
Well, sure,
Whereas-
yeah, if we have a
whereas-
bylaw, yeah.
It may be that the statute is enough, but some towns have bylaws. I think we need to do some more research on that.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is a lot of fiduciary responsibility of that, because you are a trustee, and you are responsible for investing funds, and you have all the prudent man laws, you know, prudent man investment laws that you have to abide by, and everything else,
Yeah.
so.
And at our last meeting, we decided that we wanted to let the government study committee process play out before we did anything on some of those other DOR recommendations. Is there, anyone know whether the moderator has made his appointments to the committee?
I don't.
I have not received an email that he has.
Okay.
I'm usually CC'd on those emails, but I do stand corrected, I'm sorry. It's January 6th is the deadline. So it's
That's
the
what
day
I thought,
before.
yeah.
I'm sorry, yes, I said the wrong date.
No more articles. Okay, are we good?
Good.
All right, I'll make a motion to enter executive session. Discuss strategy with respect to the following litigation. Hamilton versus Milton Planning Board and the Town of Milton. Re the Fandry property off Hillside Street. McDonough versus Hamilton, Fandry, Milton Planning Board and the Town of Milton. Re the Fandry property off of Hillside Street. Corliss versus the Planning Board, Fandry and Hamilton. Re the Fandry property off of Hillside Street. Jeremiah Connolly, trustee, versus Town of Milton. Re the property at 131 Elliott Street, believing that having these discussions in open session would have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the body, and to return to open session to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Conlon.
Yes.
Mr. Hurley.
Yes.
Mr. Cohen. Yes, we're in executive session.